Welcome to the start of a new tutorial series, and this is called Teach Me Django, which is a project built with Django and React, showing you how you can work with multiple users in a kind of mock online system where you can create assignments, fill them in, and see the results of those assignments on your profile. And so this is the finished product of that project, and what I'm going to do is just walk you through what it looks like so you get an idea of what we're actually working towards in this tutorial series. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. And I already have a user created for this. And we don't have any assignments just yet, so we'll go ahead and create one. So we'll give it a title as "This is the first assignment." We'll set the question to be, "Is this cool?" We'll say the answer is yes, and then we'll add a choice where the first one can be yes and the second one can be no. And then we can add a question, and we'll say this one is Django is awesome. We'll say the answer is true, and the choices are true and false, and then we can submit this, and now we have our assignments. An assignment that is loaded here, and we can click on it and we see we get the questions here, and we've only got 2 questions. So we've got, "Is this cool?" We'll say yes. Go to the next one. We'll see Django is awesome, and let's say I want to go back and I'm actually going to change my answer. We'll say, "No, this isn't cool. Go forward. Django is awesome." We'll say true, and we can click submit. And if we head over to our profile, you can see we got 50% for that assignment. And that's because we said that Django is not cool, whereas the answer was yes, it actually is cool. And so before judging how complete this project is in terms of validation and seeing detail views and thinking there's a lot more stuff to be displayed and that this is really just too basic, you'll be surprised as to how much actually goes on in the backend to get this to work. And so we're going to be jumping into a whole lot of customization of serializers and a lot of React as well. So this is what we're going to be building in this project, where the 2 different kinds of users we're looking at are students and teachers. Only teachers can actually create these assignments, and only students, in theory, should be allowed to answer these assignments. And so we're going to walk you through the process of creating this multiple user system, and let's get started with it now. So to get started, you're going to want to open up VS Code. I've got absolutely nothing here. An empty directory which we'll use to store all the project content. And to get started, we're actually going to clone something from our GitHub page, and this is a boilerplate project that we created for getting started with Django and React. And that is here, the Django React boilerplate. And this is just to help getting started with adding projects that are built with Django and React, because it seems we're going to be doing this for quite a while. So I'm just going to grab this URL here, and we're going to clone into this repository. So we'll just say git clone, and that will bring this repository into this folder. And so there we have it. We've got the VS Code project settings. We've got a home directory, which is basically our Django project. And we are currently using 3 different settings files, depending on whether you're in production or development. And then we have a source folder, which has a basic React project set up as well. Now, I'll link a video showing you everything that's contained inside this project, which we covered in one of our videos showing you how to set up authentication between Django and React. So everything in that video we basically took and just compiled it into a boilerplate repository so that we could just pull that easily, so we don't have to keep on repeating ourselves. That way we already have a nice setup to get started with, and we can get working from here. So what I'm going to do is just bring all of the folder contents inside this directory that I'm working with. And there we go. Now I'll just clear out the terminal, and we can take a look at what we've got. We've got the VS Code settings, which basically is just setting pylint and the Python path, the virtual environment path, and some files to exclude in our VS Code editor. We've got the home directory, which has a base settings for all the installed apps, middleware, templates, and some other things that we'll need for both development and production. And then in development, you've got the allowed hosts being our local host, debug being true, the WSGI application for development, and a DB SQLite 3 database setup, with the local host of 3000 being in our course origin whitelist. And then in production, we've got our domain, which we would need to add, the different WSGI application for production, a database set up for Postgres, which we don't actually have those credentials set up just yet, but we've got the configuration there. We've got auth password validators and a static file storage for when we use white noise. And this is all with the intention to eventually host this on Heroku. That's why we have a proc file here, but we'll get into that towards the end. So we also have the source folder, which currently has our app.js, which is auto trying to sign up. We're using React Redux, hence these map state to props and map dispatch methods that we're connecting to our app. We've got a higher order component, which basically returns the children of the props that are passed in. And we've just got a layout, a login, and a sign up container, which again also comes from that video tutorial on authentication with Django and React. And so what we want to achieve in this video is basically to set up the Django Rest Framework REST auth, which is what we're going to use to authenticate users on the back end, but we're going to need to customize that if we want to actually have our own custom user. So we're going to create our user, we're going to create the serializers for that user, and show you how you can customize the REST auth to allow for those users. So we'll get started by opening up the terminal and just creating ourselves a virtual environment, which we'll just name virtualenv. And there it is. We can then activate that, and we'll say pip install -r requirements.txt, and we'll open up another terminal here to install our node dependencies. So we'll just run npm i, and we can get started with creating ourselves a users app. And this is where we're going to create our custom user. So we'll say python manage.py start app, and we'll say the name is users, and we can go into our home directory to settings base.py, and inside the installed apps we can scroll down and add our users. And with that we can close base.py, and we'll go into our users app here, and we'll go into the models. And what we're going to do is import the abstract user, which comes from Django's contrib auth models. So we'll say from django.contrib.auth.models import the abstract user. Now see, you get two types of users that are prompted. One is the base user and one's the abstract user. Now the abstract base user will require a lot more configuration. I've also covered this in another video where we actually use the abstract base user to create our own custom user and show you how you can link that up to be the default user of your site. Whereas if you use the abstract user, it's actually a lot simpler. So we're going to go ahead and use that. We'll add a class here and call this the user, which inherits from the abstract user. And basically what this means is that it has all those attributes like username, password, email. All of that configuration is done for you, except now you can add the fields that you particularly want to actually add that will make your users that much more unique. Now in our case, we're going to store two kinds of users. We're going to have a student and a teacher. You could be both at the same time, but we're not too worried about that. And so the way that we're going to handle that is by adding two fields on the user. And these are going to be Boolean fields. So we're going to have the isStudent, which will be models.boolean field. So either true or false. And then we'll have the isTeacher, which is also a models.boolean field. So what that means is that when we create the user, we're going to need to pass in whether this user is a student, so either true or false, and we need to pass in if it's a teacher. And then we'll just say define the string method, which takes in self, and we'll say return self.username, because remember this does inherit from the abstract user. That is our base user, and that is what we'll be using when we create our users. Now what I'm also going to do is define another class here, which is the student, and this will just be a models.model. And all we're doing is basically assigning a one-to-one field with the user, so that instead of working with the base user that we've created here, we'll work with the student model when we need to refer to an actual student. And we're not going to add too much configuration to this model, but it's just a little bit more convenient because here on the student, you could then pass in a lot more other fields like what classrooms they belong to, what grade they're in, etc. You could do a whole bunch of things like that. Whereas the user, you just want to define whether that user is a student or a teacher. That's the whole purpose of this model. Here we'll just say that the user equals to a one-to-one field with the user that we just created here. And we'll say on delete equals to models.cascade, so that if the user is deleted, then their student is deleted as well. And then we'll just say define string, which takes in self, and say return self.user.email, for example, or username we could do as well. And so with that, we then need to go and tell Django that our default user is actually inside our users app. So we're going to go into the home directory to settings base.py, and we go all the way to the bottom here. And we'll just say that the auth user model equals to users dot user. So basically what it's saying is look inside the users.models and find the user model. That is our default auth user model to use when authenticating users. And I'm also going to add one more setting here, which is for unique emails. So we'll say that the account unique email equals to true. Basically, this will ensure that we don't get any duplicate emails of our users. And like that, we can now try and make migrations. So we'll just bring up the terminal. We'll say manage.py make migrations. And we see we get create model user and create model student. And then we'll say manage.py migrate to actually migrate those. And we also get the base migrations for the entire project. And now, if we were to try and create a super user, then you'll see that you'll actually run into an error because it's going to use our custom user, which has 2 extra fields on it. So it's going to tell you that is student cannot be null and is teacher cannot be null in that user. So to create an admin user, we're going to need to create it through the Python shell. So we'll say python manage.py shell. And here we'll say from users.models import user. We'll say that a equals to a user. We'll say that a.username equals to admin. A.password equals to, let's say, dude123. We'll say a.isStaff equals to true, so that it's a staff member. And a.isSuperUser equals true as well. And then just say a.save. And you see that it gives us the user.isStudent cannot be null. So we say a.isStudent, let's set it equal to false. And we'll say a.isTeacher equals to true. And now we can say a.save. And now it's correctly saving. And if we were to say user objects.all, then you can see yet a query set response with the user of admin. So we'll exit out of that now. And let's call python manage.py run server so we can actually run the server and view it in the browser. This is what we have by default because we already have a build directory. Up here in our project, we have the build directory, which is what's being referenced inside our base settings to use as static files. So we could actually come here to the login and let's try and log in with our user. We'll say admin and pass in dude123, and it seems that that didn't work. Let's check the console, and we get a server responded with a status of 400, a bad request. And if we take a look at the server here, it's not giving us any information. It's just saying that the post to this URL wasn't successful. It was a bad request. And the reason for this is purely because we haven't set up REST auth to understand our new custom user, because the custom user is trying to see the default Django user that it's used to, but we're not using the default user, we're using our own custom user. So we need to go into our base.py and we need to configure the REST auth serializers and the REST auth register serializers. And you can check this in their documentation if you just search for custom Django Rest Auth. Then here the first link is a configuration for Django Rest Auth 0.9.3. So if we check that out, then here you can see it says you can define your custom serializers for each endpoint without overriding URLs and views by adding REST auth serializers dictionary in your Django settings. Possible key values are the login serializer, the token serializer, the user details serializer, and all these. So for example, it says the REST auth serializers is a dictionary, where the login serializer is a path to a custom login serializer, and the same thing for the token serializer. And it also says here, you can define your custom serializers for registration. However, note, the custom register serializer must define a define save method that returns a user model instance. And that's extremely important if we want to get this right. So first, let's copy this default configuration there. Come back into base, add it there, and we don't need the token serializer. We just need the user details serializer. That's basically to tell REST auth that this is the user model that we're using, and that is the specific serializer for that model. So we'll copy that user details serializer. Let's copy that, paste that there. And obviously the path we'll sort out in a second. And we can also specify the REST auth register serializers, which is also important because we're going to need to handle the kind of registration for our custom user, meaning when the user signs up, they need to say whether they're a student or a teacher, which means that our registration process is going to be different as well. So we'll open up a dictionary here, and in here we need to specify the register serializer. So we'll add it there, and we'll just leave this blank for now. And what we need to do is go back to our users app and actually add a serializer inside it. So we'll just say new file, which will be serializers.py. How I got this to work is purely just by Googling what is required. And so this is primarily focusing on showing you how it comes to work. But the moral of the story is that when you don't understand something and you're trying to figure out what to do, Google it and keep looking for examples of where other people have done it and try to apply that to what you're doing. Now, the first serializer that we're going to create is the user serializer. And this is the one that we've defined here for the user details serializer. So we're going to specify the path here to be users.serializers.user serializer. And we'll take that name, come back into our serializers, and we'll just say class user serializer that inherits from the serializers, and we'll need to import that. So we'll say from REST Framework import serializers, and we're going to inherit the model serializer. And if we need to use that, we're going to need our model. So we'll say from .models import user, and here we'll specify the class meta and say the model is a user, and then we'll need to specify the fields. And the fields is just a list of fields on our model that we want to include in the serializer. Now, normally you would have things like the email, you would have the username, and in our case, we're going to also need to pass in the extra fields that we created. So we'll add in password as well, and we're going to add in our is student and our is teacher. And that's it. That's our custom user serializer that REST auth now will use when serializing our user. And now we need to handle the register serializer. So we'll do the same kind of concept. We'll say class custom register serializer, just so that we don't have a really long name. And this is going to inherit from the register serializer. And we can see here in the register serializer class, it's from restauth.registration.views.registerView, and then restauth registration serializers.register serializer. Now you can either create your own custom serializer and handle it as well, or you can inherit from this register serializer and do it that way. So that's how I decided to do it. So we're going to need to import that. So we'll just come back in here and we'll go to the top and say from REST auth, and we can actually remove that. So we're saying from REST auth registration serializers, import the register serializer, and we'll install these. Cool. So now that we have those installed, we've got our register serializer, and we're going to inherit that in our custom register serializer. And this is very similar to a model serializer. We can also specify a class meta and the fields. So I'm going to do that as well. We'll copy all of that right there. However, I'm going to add two fields here as well. So the first one will be the isStudent, and the second one will be the isTeacher. And this will just inherit from the serializer's Boolean field, and that'll also be for the isStudent. And now let's actually jump into the front end a little bit to handle that form. So I'm actually going to close the models, and we'll go into the source to our containers, and let's go to the sign up. So here we have signup.js, and we've got our registration form. And basically what we want to do is just come all the way down here to the end of the form where we have the submit button, and we want to add another form item inside here, which is basically going to be a select field with two options. The first option will be student and the second one will be teacher. So we'll add a form item, and I'm actually just going to copy the get field decorator and just paste it in there. And inside here we'll want to add our select. So we'll just say select like that, and we need to go to the top and import this from &d, and we'll specify the get field decorator to be user type. So that's how we're going to access it from the form's values. And we'll say please select a user, and we'll get rid of the validator here as well. And inside the select we need to add an option, and inside there will be student and the second one will be teacher. We'll set the value of the first one to be student and the value of the second one to be teacher, and then we can say that the placeholder of the select is select a user type, and we need to import option as well, so we'll import option there. And now we just need to make sure that we handle receiving the value of the option that's currently selected in the form. So we'll go up to the top here and we'll say let isStudent equal to false initially, and then we'll just grab the user type from the values, because that's how we're doing it currently. We have values.username and email, etc. So we'll say if values.userType equals to student, then we'll say isStudent equals to true. And then here in the onAuth, where we basically register the user, we'll add another field here which will be isStudent, and this will get passed into the onAuth dispatch method. So if we go to the bottom here, we have onAuth, and we just need to make sure we pass that in as a fifth argument. So this will be isStudent, and that gets passed into the auth signup, which is inside our actions, and we'll add it as another argument there as well, just like that. And now we just need to make sure that we handle that in the store. So if you go to store actions auth, then here if we scroll down to the auth signup, we need to make sure that we grab that argument coming in, which is the isStudent, so like that. And what I'm actually going to do is create a constant user, and this user is going to have the username, the email, the password1, password2, and it's going to have isStudent, which is coming through as an argument there. And I'm also going to set the isTeacher to be the opposite of isStudent. So that means if student is true, then teacher is false. Then here when we post to the registration URL, we can, instead of passing this user that only has an email, password 1 and password 2, we're going to pass the entire object that we just created up here, which is the user object. So we can delete all of that and just pass in user as the object. And what we're going to do is actually change the local storage handling, so that instead of setting the item of a token and an expiration date, we're rather just going to set an entire user which will hold the token, username, and all the details about that user. So that way we can store whether they're a student or a teacher as well. So what I'm going to do is actually get rid of these local storage commands here, but before we do that, we'll create another constant here which will be our user, and this is going to be the user object that we store in the local storage. So it's going to have the token, which will be the response data key, and we just need to reference it with a colon. We're then also going to pass in the username, which will be basically the username that we passed in to the dispatch method, so we don't need to pass a colon there. We're then also going to pass in is student, and we'll pass in is teacher as well. And then we'll set the expiration date here to be a new date, just like how we created it over here, and just use a colon as well. And there we have our user, so we can get rid of these commands here. And then we'll say set the item of user to be json.stringify the user. And we can get rid of the expiration date call there. And instead of calling auth success of a token, we'll pass in a user instead and handle that in a second. But basically, now we're storing this entire user in the local storage, which will come in handy later on as well. And so let's go to the auth success method here, which is all the way up top here. And we'll change it to receive a user instead of a token. And then that user will pass in as the argument here. And we can remove that there. And then we just need to handle that in the reducer. So we'll open up the reducer's auth. We'll go to the auth success. And we'll actually need to add some new state here. So for example, the username will now be null as well. We'll have is student, which will be null. And we'll have is teacher, which will be null as well. And then we can come down here to the auth success, and instead of this coming from action.token, this will be action.user.token. We'll take the username, which will be action.user.username. We'll have is student, which will be action.user.isStudent, and the same kind of concept for is teacher. And we just need to make sure that in the action, when calling auth success, we make sure that, for example, here in the auth check state method, that when we call auth success, we pass in a user and not a token. So instead, up top here, we'll say constant user equals to get item user, and we're going to need to pass that. So we'll say json.pass the local storage user, and that's because this is an object. So we need to pass that into an object. And then we'll say if the user is undefined or the user is null, then dispatch logout. Otherwise, we'll create an expiration date where instead of grabbing this from the local storage, this will now come from user.expiration date, where user is what we just grabbed over here. And we're saying if the expiration date is less than new date, then log out. Otherwise, we will dispatch auth success, which will take in the user. And we'll just save that. And if we go to the logout method as well, then instead of removing the expiration and token, we can just say remove user. We can also open up the terminal to run the front end. So let's just clear some of these terminals out here. And we've got the packages installed. So we'll say npm start. So we'll take a look here, and it says in actions auth we have is teacher is undefined, and that we just need to set to the opposite of is student. And it says that the signup.js doesn't contain an export named option, so let's go to signup, and this is because our option inherits from the select. So we just need to say constant option equals to select dot option. Now if we check it out, now we can log in. Let's click login and click on sign up, and we have a username, email, password, and if we click select a user type, and when we click the drop down here, we see student and teacher as the options for the user type. And let's inspect this here, and let's see what happens if we try sign up. So we'll pass in a username, pass in an email and a password, and we'll pass in a select user type of, let's say, student. And if I click sign up, we see that it gave us a error connection refused. And let's take a look as to why that is. And it says in serializers.get, the register serializer, it got not enough values to unpack, expected 2, but got 1. Now this is because of a very silly error, which is that we didn't actually add a comma here at the end, and even pass in our path to the register serializer. So let's add this path here in our serializers, and this is users.serializers.custom register serializer, just like that. Now let's come back and try login, or sign up rather, again. And if I click student and click sign up, now we get a 500 internal server error. So let's go back and see. and it says here integrity error, not null constraint failed, users.user.isStudent. So basically what this is telling us is that when the user is being created, it's not being passed in the isStudent and the isTeacher as well. Now the reason for that is because the default save method to actually save a user does not involve using the isStudent or the isTeacher fields. So what we need to do is override the save method. So what I'm going to do is just define the save method here, and we're going to say self and request. And all I'm going to do here is just say print the request, so we actually see it come through. And so with that, let's open up the terminal again, and we'll go to the sign up page, but let's actually get rid of the rerouting here. So if we go to the handle submit, we'll not push ourselves to this URL, so that way we can continuously test this. And from this point here, overriding the save method involves using an adapter which comes from Django's allauth. So if we search here for adapter Django allauth, and we can just click on this first one here, then here it talks about the advanced usage of creating custom user models and basically creating and populating user instances. And here it says allauth account adapter.default account adapter. That is what's used to create an instance of a user. And we can actually navigate to Django's REST auth. And if we go to the introduction, let's go to edit on GitHub, and we'll just go to Django REST auth. And if we click on REST auth, and then we can click on registration, and then serializers.py. And here you can see it has an import from allauth.account.adapter, import the get adapter. And if you scroll down, you'll see the different types of serializers. So they've got the social account, the social login, and if we keep going, we see we eventually come across the register serializer. And you can see all of the fields on it. You can see the username, the email, password 1 and 2, and then these validation methods, the get clean data, and the save method. And here you can see it's saying adapter equals to get adapter, and then it uses that adapter from Django allauth to create a new user using the request. It then uses the adapter to save the user by passing in the request and the user, and then it just adds some extra custom stuff here for the custom sign up and setting up the user email. So what I'm going to do is copy all of that, the save method plus the define get clean data, and we'll come back in here, override the save method, and we're going to need to import the adapter. So let's go all the way to the top here of the file, and we'll say from allauth.account.adapter, import the get adapter. And we're basically going to use their logic. We're going to get the adapter. We're then going to use that to create a new user with the request. We'll assign the cleaned data to self by calling the get cleaned data. And what that does is call the method on this class, which grabs the validated data and grabs the username and all these fields from that. Then using the clean data, it saves the user by passing in that new user, and we can then get rid of the custom sign up and the setup user email. And essentially what we want to do is not only grab the username, password 1 and email, we'll actually want to copy password 1 so we have password 2 that we can see as well. And we actually also want to get two other fields, which are the isStudent and the isTeacher. So now when we call get clean data, we're going to get everything that we need to create our own custom user. We're then assigning it to self.cleanData. And before we go ahead and save the user, we then need to just assign the isStudent field and the isTeacher field to our user. So we'll say user.isStudent equals to self.cleanData isStudent, and do the same thing for isTeacher. And then at the end of that, we can call user.save. And this is very important, this command here, user.save. So now we then use the adapter to save the user and return that user at the end. That's also very important. Whenever you override a save method, you need to return an instance of whatever you're saving. So we return the user. And now let's actually see how this works out. We'll open up the terminal and we see we get one error here, which is just the commas. So let's add some commas there. And now everything's working. So if we come back to the boilerplate, and this is actually on the local host, let's go to port 3000 and click sign up. And look at that. It was a successful post request and we got a status of 201, which means that our user was created. And if you come back here, you can see that it's now saying log out, which means that our user is actually logged in. And that means we can actually go and log in to our admin. So if we go to admin, we're not going to be able to actually log in with our super user that we created earlier. And so let's rather just go and use the user that we just created now and create them as a super user. So we'll go back in here and actually add a new terminal, and we'll say Python manage.py shell. We'll say from users.models import user. We'll say mat equals to users.objects.get username equal to mat. And let's just change that. That's meant to be user. And if we check what mat looks like, there it is. And if I say mat dot is super user equals true, and mat dot is staff equal true, and then save, we can then exit. And if we come back, let's refresh this, and we can sign in with Matt. And there we go. We're now logged in, and we can actually add our custom user into the admin. So let's do that. So we'll just go here to admin, and we'll say from dot models import user, and then say admin.site dot register user. And we'll also want to unregister this groups here. So we'll say from django.contrib.auth.models import the group, and then we'll say admin.site.unregister group. Now let's come back and refresh this, and then we have our users at the bottom, and if we click on it, we have Matt. And if we go all the way down, you can see that we have our isStudent and isTeacher fields, where isStudent is set to true. And so let's actually create one more user here. We'll log out and just refresh this and say username equals to test at Gmail, and we'll set the user type to be a teacher. And if we click sign up, we're now logged in. Let's go here, go back to users, we have test, scroll all the way down, and teacher is set to true. And that basically confirms that our sign up is correctly working. We've got a custom user that is able to be successfully created on our front end and in the back end. And so now what we want to do is actually confirm that logging in works. So let's log out here, and we're here on the login page, and let's try and log in with, let's say, Matt, for example. And if I click login, then we get a success as well. So in the last one, we finished working on logging in and creating our own custom user in the front end and customizing our serializer with Django's REST auth package to handle that in the back end. And in this one, we're just going to finish off the user by adding in a view set to allow us to actually view all our users and also to view each user's profile. And while we're at it, we'll work on creating the assignment serializer as well, which will allow us to create assignments. So if you'd like to follow along with this tutorial, you can just go to GitHub and navigate to our Teach Me Django repository. So here it is, Teach Me Django. And then you can just follow to these commits here to see which commit you'd like to continue from. We'll also add a description of these commits inside the project README file to help point out which commits were the starting code for each tutorial. And so once you've got all the code set up and you're ready to go, then let's get started. So let's head into the users app, and we're going to go to the admin. Now why I want to work in the admin is because we're going to customize the way that the admin works in terms of these users and how they display everything on this form. Now we can actually override this entire form. We can change it to be our own custom form, and that's what we're going to do. So what we need to do is first import the user admin, which comes from the admin module. So we'll say from django.contrib.admin, import the user admin, and we're going to say as the base user admin so that we can inherit from this. And here we'll say class user admin inherits from the base user admin, and then we'll register that with our custom user. And recently we posted a video on how to actually customize and improve your Django admin. So I advise watching that video before actually continuing with this, because in that video we explain everything that we're about to do right now. So instead I'm actually just going to go through this rather quickly. So we'll add the add field sets, and this is basically just a tuple, and the first one I'm going to say the name is none, and then we'll set up the fields to be email, username. We'll add is student, is teacher, and we'll add the password 1, and we'll add password 2. And this is basically the fields that are going to display on the add user form. We'll then add the second one here, which will be the permissions. So that's the name of what we're adding. And then the fields are going to be is super user and is staff. And then we'll add the field sets. And this is also going to be a list of tuples. I'm going to copy this first one here. However, instead of it being password 1 and 2, in this case it's just password, because now this is the display of the user once it's actually created. And then we'll also add the permissions here. And I'm also going to add some other options such as the list display. And the list display is going to take in the email, it's going to take in the username, it's going to take in is student and is teacher. And then I'm also going to add the search fields, and this is a list of fields that we can search by. So I'll just add email and username, and then we'll just say ordering equals to email. And if we check the server, then we see we're getting this import error, and that's because this comes from auth.admin. So now that's working, and if we come back in here and we refresh this page, now you can see it looks a little bit different because we're only showing the fields that we want to show. And of course you could leave it as the default view, but I think this looks a little bit cleaner. And you could also go back to users here, and you can see the list display is a lot nicer. We've got is student and is teacher showing. You've got a filter here, you've got a search bar, and let's add our admin's email here. We'll just say, for example, admin@gmail.com. And if we click to add a user, then you can see all the fields that are required for adding a user, which is very convenient as well. And so now let's just go ahead and create an API for our user model so that we can fetch users, and that'll be useful so that we can come in here and add a profile link, and then that would take you to, for example, /profile/1 to actually see the profile of that user. And what we're going to show in that profile are the graded assignments. So let's go here to the views, and we'll first import our user. So we have to say from .models import user, and then we're also going to need our serializer. So we'll just say from .serializers import the user serializer, and we'll make this a view set so that it's not a lot of code. So we'll say from REST Framework import view sets, and then we'll just create a class user view set that will inherit from the view sets model view set. And all we need to do there is specify the serializer class, which is our user serializer, and specify the query set, which will just be user objects.all. And then we can take the user view set and use that inside our own urls.py. So we'll create one inside the user's model. So we'll create one inside the user's app. And so here we'll just say from REST framework dot routers, import the default router. And then we'll say from dot views, import our view set. And we'll say our router equals to the default router. And then we'll say router.register, the regular expression with an empty string like this. And we'll say this is the user view set. And we'll say the base name equals to users. And then set our URL patterns, which is what Django looks for, equal to the router URLs. Then we can just go into our home directory, into the urls.py. And then in here, we'll just add a path to the user's path. So we'll say path users and say include users.urls. And now if we also just make sure we add a comma there, now we can see we're not getting any errors. And we should be able to also check this out in our local host. So if we go to /users, then we can see we get the built-in Django Rest Framework displaying the user list. And if we went to, for example, users1 and put a slash on the end of that as well, then we get the instance of this user. So now what we want to do is translate that into the equivalent display of a user's profile here in the front end. And so let's go and close all of this out here. And basically where we want to work is inside source. And we'll get started by adding a new root here. And this root is going to go to /profile and then have an ID at the end of that. And we're going to create a component called profile to handle that. And we'll just say import profile from containers /profile. And then that means inside containers, we need to create the profile.js. And we'll get started by creating a class called profile, which extends from React. And this time we'll use a pure component. And we'll say render and then return some JSX. And we'll need to import React for this. So we'll say import React from React. And at the end of this here, we'll then create our map dispatch to props and map state to props, which will connect to the component. So we'll say import from React Redux. And this is connect. And here we'll say constant map state to props, which takes in the state and returns an object. And we'll first grab the token, which comes from state.auth.token. We'll grab the username, which comes from state.auth.username. And then we'll start the map dispatch to props. So we'll say map dispatch to props, which takes in a dispatch and returns an object. And here we basically want to list out the dispatch methods to actually receive the user's graded assignments. However, we don't have that functionality yet, so we'll just add a comment there and only work with this once we actually have it. And then we'll just say export default connect, and we'll pass in the map state to props and pass in the profile. And if we take a look at this, we basically just need to fill in some content here in the return statement. So we'll just add a div and say hi, and then just say this.props.username. And if we take a look at this, let's first log in. And let's go to /profile/1. And if we try /2, and we don't get the username showing. Now the reason why we're not actually getting the username showing is because our login method did not save the user into the local storage. We still need to configure that. So let's head back here, and what we want to do is go to the store and to our actions of auth, and here with the auth login method, we basically just want to kind of do the same thing as what we did here, where we created a user and then store that user in the local storage. So we'll just copy that, and we'll do that right after we get a response, where the token is the response data.key, the username is the username, the isStudent is going to come from the data as well. So we say response.data.userType.isStudent, and then we'll pass the same thing for isTeacher, and the expiration date is the same as well. And then we just want to get rid of these constants here and set the user to a JSON stringify of the user object, and then say auth success of that user. And so now if we go and try that again, and we get a bad request here on the server. So let's see why that's happening. If we go here to the Python 3.6, it just gives us a bad request. It doesn't actually tell us anything about it. And so basically what we want to do is go back to our serializers and actually configure how we receive a token from the server. So let's head back to the users app, and if we go to serializers, now the reason for this custom serializer is so that when we log in, we receive not only the key from Django Rest Auth, meaning the token, but we also want to actually get the user type, and that being either a student or a teacher, and we also want to get the user ID. And the reason for that is so that we can store that ID in our user object and only navigate to our profile. And so basically what this means is that we're going to override the token serializer that Django Rest Auth uses. So we can just say class token serializer, and again you can find this in the documentation as we showed last time, and this is going to just be a normal model serializer, and I'm going to set the user type to be a serializer method field. So serializer method field. Now a serializer method field allows you to specify a method on the serializer that will return the data that you're looking for. So in our case, all we need to do is say define get and then underscore the name of the field you created. So in our case, get user type, and it's going to take in self and an object. And I'll say that the serializer data equals to, now in this case this is going to be the user serializer, because we want to get information regarding the user and then return that information, and that being the user type. So what we pass into it, we pass in the object.user. So this is the instance that we pass into the serializer, and then we just say .data. So basically we're getting the equivalent JSON object of that data, and then we can just say is student equals to the serializer data dot get is student, and the same thing for is teacher, and then we just have to return a dictionary with the keys and values corresponding to what we want. So in our case we want the is student to be is student, and we want is teacher to be is teacher. So this get user type is going to return this dictionary on our serializer. And now all we need to do is just specify the fields of our token serializer. So we'll say class meta, and we'll set the model equals to a token, which we'll import in a second. And then we'll say that the fields are the key, the user, and then our user type that we specified right there. And so now we just need to go and import this token, which comes from Django's REST framework. So we'll say from REST framework dot auth token dot models import token, and we can check the server and it's still running. And now let's actually bring this to the left here, and inside our auth.js we'll just come here and say console.log the response data, and we'll come back here and we'll log in and say log in with, let's say, Matt, for example. And you can see that currently we're only getting the key, but now we want to get all those extra fields. So we just need to bring our token serializer and take this into our home settings base.py. And then here in our REST auth serializers, we're just going to add the token serializer. And this is going to come from users.serializers.token serializer. And now let's try it again. We'll go log in. And you can see that currently the error was cannot read property is student of undefined. And that's because here in our auth, we're reading it from user type, which is something that's going to come back here as the user type field on the token serializer. So now let's go and log in with Matt. And now you can see that we get the key, we get the user, which is the user ID, and we get the user type, which is specifying is student to be true and is teacher to be false. And now you can see that we're logged in as well. And if I refresh the page, we're still logged in, which means that we are storing our object correctly in the local storage. And now let's just go and add a link here, which will take us to our profile. So we'll just come back here and we can close our serializer and base.py. And we want to go into the layout. So we'll go to containers layout, and we already have connect imported, which will allow us to access these map dispatch and map state to props from React Redux. And basically what we want to do is just add another breadcrumb item. So we can actually remove the list item here, and we'll just make this profile. And this is just going to take us to profiles and then an ID. So we'll make this output dynamically and use string substitution. And this will be this.props.userID. Then the user ID we can just define in a constant map state to props, which takes in the state and then just returns an object where we'll say the user ID equals to state.auth.userID. And then that means that we need to store that inside our auth.js Redux reducer. So one, we need to make sure that we get it on the login method and the signup method. So we'll come here and say that the user ID equals to the response.data.user. Remember when we saw that when we logged out the user response in the console. And we'll just copy that and go down into the auth signup and also pass it here in this object user, so that in both instances we will grab the user ID. And that means that inside our reducer we'll need to pass in user ID as the action.user.userID and then store this in the state as well. And we'll initialize it as null. And now that means that we just need to log out and just refresh this. And if we log in with, let's say, Matt, and if we click on profile, currently it takes us to profiles/undefined. And so if we see why that is, we can close this reducer, and that's because we didn't put map state to props in our connect method like that. So let's come back here and we'll just go back to home, and if we click profile, now it takes us to /profiles/2. And so that ends this tutorial, basically just confirming that our users are able to actually log in and we're able to store their user ID and the type of user that they are inside our local storage, which will allow us to actually do some interesting things in terms of displaying certain links. For example, if they are a teacher, then you could add a create link here to display, which will allow them to create assignments. And so we'll get started with that in the next one. So what we're going to do in this one is we're going to start with the assignments. And so this is basically going to be like our API, where users will be able to create assignments, and those users will have to be teachers. They'll create the assignments, and then we can see them here in the home view, which will list all those assignments out. So if you'd like to follow along with this tutorial, you can just go to GitHub and navigate to our Teach Me Django repository. So here it is, Teach Me Django. And then you can just follow to these commits here to see which commit you'd like to continue from. We'll also add a description of these commits inside the project README file to help point out which commits were the starting code for each tutorial. And so once you've got all the code set up, and you're ready to go, then let's get started. So let's head over here, and I'm going to stop the server and just call Python manage.py start app, and we'll call it API. And inside API, we can go to the models to get started with this. And so we're going to create 3 models. We're going to create an assignment. And so now let's think about the kinds of models that we're going to create. We've already mentioned that we're going to create an assignment. So let's just add assignment here. And if we think about the fields on an assignment, we could give it a title. And this would just be like the title of the assignment. So like midterm exam or something like that. And then there would have to be a teacher that's assigned to that title, because that's the person that actually created the assignment. And we would also have to reference the questions on each assignment. However, I'm not going to do it as a many-to-many field of questions on the assignment. Instead, what I'm going to do is create a question model. And each question is going to have its question, which will be kind of like the title of the question. There will then be choices. So these will be the actual answer choices to the question. And then we'll also have to assign which of those is the actual answer. And we could do this in quite a number of ways. We could just make it a character field, or we could make it a select field where the choices are equal to the choices of the question. But I think the character field is just the simplest way to do it. And then we also have the assignment, and this is the assignment object that we created here. So this will be a foreign key, and this will allow us to then assign the question to each assignment. We'll then also give each question an order, and this is so that we can actually order them on the assignment. And the reason why we're creating that instead of using the ID is because if you use the question ID, we could have, for example, question 12 and 13 on assignment 2, and we want to reference those questions in terms of their ID relevant to the assignment. So meaning question 12 would actually be question 1 on assignment 2, or whichever assignment it is. So that way, by creating an order, which would just be an integer field, we can assign the order of each question on the assignment. And then lastly, we have these choices here. And what I'm going to do is actually make this a many-to-many field with a choice object. And this will actually also be the answer field as well, where this will be a foreign key. And in the choice model, we're simply just going to have the title. So basically, this just means that we'll create a choice and then assign those choices to each question. And so those are the basic models. And what we're also going to create is a graded assignment. Now, the graded assignment is kind of like an in-between model between the assignment and the student. And the reason for this is we could just add a field here, which would be like graded. And this could be like a Boolean field. So basically meaning that we set it to false when it's initially created, and then we set it to true when it's been graded. But I think a better approach to this would be creating a graded assignment model. So we say graded assignment, and these fields are simply just going to be the student who actually completed the assignment. We're then going to have the assignment that was completed, so a foreign key on that assignment, and then we'll have the grade. And so that way, when a user actually completes the assignment, it will create a completely new instance that relates entirely just to the fact that it was graded. And I think that's a much better way of managing it. Let's create these models. We'll get started with the assignment. So we'll say class assignment, and it comes from models.model. We'll say that the title is a character field, and we'll just set the max length to be 50. And we'll say that the teacher is a foreign key on the user model, and that means we need to import the user. So we'll say from the users.models import user, and then we just need to specify the onDelete, which will be models.cascade, and then we'll just define the string method here and say this is self, and then just say return self.title, and we can delete those notes there. Then we have the graded assignment, so we'll say class graded assignment, which comes from models.model. We'll say that the student is a foreign key on the user as well, and we'll also say onDelete equals to models.cascade. We'll say that the assignment equals to a foreign key with the assignment, and we'll say onDelete equals to models.setNull, and we'll say that blank and null are true. And the reason for that is just because if the assignment was deleted, maybe you actually do want to keep record of previous assignments that were completed. So that way you can just say set null, and basically the assignment will just be null. Of course, you could just make this models.cascade if you want to be simple, and then we'll have grade equals to models.float field so that we can handle decimals. And then we'll just say define string, which takes in self, and we'll just say return the self.student.username. So that's the graded assignment. We then have the question and the choice, and I'm actually going to bring the choice above here so that we can reference it inside the question model. So we'll say class choice from models.model, and we'll just give it a title, which is a character field, and just say the maximum length equals to 50, and then define string just like this one. And then we have the question model, so we'll say class question, which comes from models.model. We'll then say that the question equals to models.character field, and this could be like max length of 200. Remember, this is the actual question that they're asking. Then you have the choices, and this is going to be a many to many field with the choice model that we just created up here. We'll then have the answer, which is going to be a foreign key with the choice, and we'll say that onDelete equals to models.cascade, and we're going to have to pass in the related name because we're referencing the choice twice. So we'll say that the related name is the answer. We'll then say that the assignment that this question belongs to is a foreign key to the assignment model, and we'll set onDelete equal to models.cascade. We'll then create the order, which is an integer field, and actually we could make that a small integer field because it's not going to get too large. And then we can add the define string method, and we'll just say return self.question, and there we go. So we can delete that. And now we have our models: assignment, graded assignment, choice, and question. And we can go ahead and make those migrations after we add the API into our installed apps. So we'll just add it here, and there we go. So we'll just bring up the terminal here, and we'll say manage.py make migrations, and there we have the models created. And now we can say manage.py migrate. There we go. And let's run the server now. And I'm just going to bring that down. And now inside the API, what I'm going to do is create two folders. The one folder is going to handle the URLs for the assignment view set, and then the second folder is going to handle the URLs for the graded assignment view set. So we'll just create assignments, and then we'll also create the graded assignments. And then inside each one, we'll just create a urls.py, and there we go. And so now we can go to our home, and we'll go to the URLs here, and then we'll add a path, and we'll say path to assignments, which will be the API URL to the assignments view set. And we'll just say include api.assignments.urls, and we'll do the same sort of thing for graded assignments like that. And this will be api.gradedassignments.urls, and we can close that and actually come inside these URLs here. And what we want to do is actually the same thing as what we did in the users app. So let's go back to users and down to the URLs, and I'm actually just going to copy all of that, and we'll go all the way back into the assignments URLs. So we're importing the router, the default router, and then we're going to import the view set. So we don't have that. We create the default router, and then we register it using that view set, which again we haven't created yet, and then we assign it to those URLs. So we have all of that, and we can do the same thing for the graded assignment URLs. And so we don't need to focus on the graded assignments for now, but it's just so that we can get that set up for the time being, and we can then work inside the assignments URLs. So we're going to need to work on the assignment view set now. So let's go here into the API views, and we're just going to create a class assignment view set. And actually we can use the same thing as what we did in the users model. So let's actually copy everything here, and then we'll paste this there, and we don't need the render shortcut. And in this case, we're importing the assignment model. And we're going to need to create a serializer file with an assignment serializer. So let's do that. So we'll just create serializers.py just for the time being. And then we'll call this the assignment view set, which uses the assignment serializer. And the query set is the assignment objects.all. And now we can just handle the serializer. So we'll need to import the REST framework serializers. So we'll say from REST framework, import the serializers, and then we'll create a class assignment serializer, which inherits from serializers.model serializer. And that means that we need our model as well. So there's that. And then here we can just specify the class meta, where the model is the assignment. And then the fields will just say equals to _all. So basically just pass in all the fields of the assignment. And everything is working. So let's go actually to the local host to /assignments. And we see that we get the default Django Rest Framework list view. And let's head into the admin, and we can actually add those models into the admin as well. So we'll say from.models import the choice, question, assignment, and graded assignment. And then we'll just say admin.site.register each of these. And there we go. Now let's come back and refresh this. There we go. Let's go to the assignments, and let's just create one here. We'll say the assignment is a test assignment, and the teacher is, let's say, admin. We'll click save. And if we come back here and refresh this, then we aren't getting it come through just yet. And actually in the URLs is where we needed to bring in our view set. So we've got the assignment view set now, and we can put that in our router, and the base name is assignments. And we're actually getting an error here saying there's no module named API assignments views, and that's actually because this comes from api.views. So if we come back and reload this, now we can see our assignments being loaded there. Cool. So now we can go to the front end and actually pull those assignments into a list view to display here. So let's just close all of this stuff for the time being, and we'll go into the front end, into source containers, and we're going to create our assignment list.js, and we'll say import React from React, and we're actually going to need to go to and-d now. So let's go to and-d, and we want to find the list, which is here under data display. And this first one here is good enough, so we'll just copy the code, and we'll come in here and paste it. And we don't need that mounting there. And actually all we want is the large size, so we'll delete everything else. And then we'll just create a class called assignment list, which we'll say extends from react.pureComponent, and then say render and return, and we're going to return everything here, and just paste that in there. And then we'll say export the default as the assignment list, and then this assignment list we want to bring into our router. So let's go to the root here, and we'll say import the assignment list from containers assignment list, and we're just going to add another root on the end of this, and we can actually just copy one of these, and we'll just paste it here. And it's not going to go to any specific path except just slash, and we can just add the component as the assignment list. And if we come back, now we can see it displaying there. And of course this is dummy data for now, so what we want to do is actually get that data and then display it here. So we're going to use React Redux to handle that for us. So let's go into the store, into actions, and we'll create a new file which we'll call assignments.js. And this is very similar to what we're already doing here with these actions. So we're going to basically need everything from there and just paste it. So we've got auth fail, auth success, and auth start, but of course we'll rename those. So let's call this first one the get assignment list start, and I'll just copy that bit there, and that will be get assignment list success and get assignment list fail. And we're going to need to go to the action types and add our actions in here. So I just added some actions which just say get assignment list start, get assignment list fail, and success. And using these, we can then import them into the assignments and reference them here. So we'll say this is get assignment list start, and get assignment list success, and get assignment list fail. And now we just need to add the assignment, or assignments rather, into the get assignment list success action. So we pass those assignments in there. And now we need to create our function to actually get those assignments. And so we'll just call this the get assignments, which we'll have to take in a token to authenticate the user. And we'll just return a dispatch. And the first dispatch is going to be the get assignment list start, which we defined up top there. And then we'll set the Axios default.headers to have the content type as application JSON. And then we set authorization to be token, and then the token that's being passed into the function. And then we can say Axios.get, and this is going to be HTTP 127.0.0.1 to our localhost, and then to port 8000 to the assignments. And then we'll just say .then with the response that we get from the server. We'll say that the assignments equal to response.data, and then we will dispatch the get assignment list success and pass in those assignments. And otherwise we'll catch any errors and just say dispatch the get assignment list fail. And that's our method action. So we basically just need to handle this in the reducer and then add that reducer to the root reducer. So let's go to reducers and we'll add assignments.js. And this is actually going to be similar to the auth. So we'll just copy and paste everything in there, except now we don't have any of that stuff. So we have assignments, which we'll set as an empty list to get started. And if we go back to the actions, let's just copy this name. So this first one will be get assignment list start, and then we'll copy these two as well. So we'll copy that and that, paste that there. And when we get the list success, all we're getting are the assignments. So this will be assignments is action.assignments, and everything else is actually good. We can delete the auth logout, and we can delete that case there as well. So now the action type is going to be get list start, which will be get assignment list start, and then the same thing for success and fail. So just like that, and that actually should do it for the reducer. So let's go into our index.js file, and here we'll copy this and just say this is the assignment reducer, which comes from assignments, and we'll say that assignments is the assignment reducer. So now we can access the assignments via the assignments reducer, and we can close that now and close the assignments and action types. And now we just need to connect our assignment list to the store, which comes from React Redux. So this is connect. We'll come down to the bottom here and say connect the assignment list. And let's go and grab those constants like this, so we don't have to repeat ourselves. And we've got map state to props and map dispatch, which we'll pass in here. And we'll change those methods, of course. So we don't need the user ID, but we are going to need the token so we can authenticate. So this is going to be state.auth.token. And then we're going to need the get assignments, which will come from actions.getAssignments. So let's go and say import star as actions from, and then go all the way back to the store to actions assignments. And we'll say actions.getAssignments. And this is going to take in a token, which we pass in there. And we can get rid of the data list there now. And instead, what I'm actually going to do is pass in the assignments here, which will come from state.assignments.assignments. And then this is what the data will be as the data source. So this will be this.props.assignments. And if we come back, now you just have no data. And I'm going to get rid of the header and footer. And there we go. So that's what it looks like so far. And we can say that this is the assignment list. And we can actually pass in the loading, which will be state.assignments.loading. And what I'm going to do is use the skeleton from &d, which is all the way down here to feedback. So if we click on skeleton, basically it just gives you like a loading screen that isn't just a spinner. It's like as if the data is there, it's just not showing you it. So this is simply just importing skeleton from &d. So simple enough, just import it there. And we can import our higher order component. So we'll say import HOC from HOC. And here inside the return statement, we're going to say if this.props.loading, then we're going to return the skeleton and say active. And then otherwise, we will return the div with the data source. And the reason why it's not correct right now is because we can't return a dynamic output. We have to wrap this within something. So we are going to return it inside an HOC so that we don't create a div unnecessarily. And there we go. Now if we come back, obviously it's still going to say no data, but it's working. We just now need to say when we have the token, send a request to get the data. And so we'll add a method here. This one will be the component didMount. And basically we'll just say if this.props.token is not undefined and it's also not null, then we are going to call this.props.getAssignments and pass in this.props.token. And with the same kind of concept, we'll do that in the component will receive props. This isn't the best method to use right now because it is going to be removed, but we're not too worried about that for now. So basically we're just going to say if the new props.token is not equal to the current token, then we will say the same thing as what we did here. And instead of passing this.props.token, this is the new props.token. And we can actually change that as well so that it's new props.token is not undefined and new props.token is not null. Now if we come back, we get new props is undefined, so let's add it there. We're not getting any data come through, so let's log in now. So let's actually go and log in, and I'll inspect this here. So we'll log in with Matt, and let's see, we get an error here. It says objects are not valid, which is basically happening inside the assignment list. It says line 34, and that's because we're rendering out just the item. So basically it is rendering out an object. And to think ahead, what we also will need to do is create a detail view for the assignment. So what I'm going to do is create a method here that will return each list item but with a nav link inside it. So this will just be render item, and it will take an item, and we'll just say return this here, but we'll import the nav link. So we'll say import from React router DOM, which is nav link, and we will put that inside like that. And this is the link component. So there you've got the link, and we're just going to wrap the link around our list item, and here we'll specify the to property to just be like, for example, assignments 1 just for now. And here instead of being item, this will be item.title, because remember each assignment has a title and a teacher. So in our case we want to display it using the title, and if we come back now we just need to use the render item method by calling this.render item of item. And there we go. You can see that the loading skeleton displayed for a little bit, and now we have the assignment list where we also have this test assignment, which is the first assignment here. Cool, so the assignment list is working, and now we can get the assignment detail working. So like if I click on assignment 1, then you see it takes us to this link here. So we basically want to add a route to handle that. So let's go back here to routes, And we're going to just copy that one and say this is the assignment detail, which we'll create in a second. And basically we're just going to copy this here and say when you go to assignments and then an ID, then it's going to take you to the assignment detail. And now we can come back into the containers and we'll add assignment detail.js. And basically what we want to do in here is just create a card. So if we check out the cards here from &d, which are here under the data display, and we can just come down a little bit and see this one here, which has an inner card. That's quite nice. So I'm going to copy that code and we'll say import React from React, paste that there. And so we have a card which has some inner card stuff, and we can actually get rid of the second one. And I think we'll also get rid of the group title, so that we basically have a card and an inner card. And then we'll just say class assignment detail extends the React component, and we'll say render, which will return all of this stuff here. And then we can say export the default to be assignment detail. And if we come back in here, now you can see you get this card with an inner card displaying. And basically what we can do is change the card title to be the title of the assignment. And then for each question, we could add a card here, or we could be a little bit more fancy and use some other components from &d to create this effect of showing one question, and then when you answer that question you can go to the next one, and etc. So that's what we're going to do. So we're not going to list through all of them and replicate the card title here. So let's just come back in here and we can get rid of the extra there as well. And so we basically want to go back to the store, and inside our assignments actions and reducers we need to handle getting an assignment detail. So what I'm actually just going to do is copy all of this here, and we're going to now handle the methods to get the assignment detail. So let's go up here, and this one will be get assignment detail start. This will get assignment detail success and detail fail, and then this will be get assignments detail. And in this case we want to pass in the token and the ID of the assignment that we want to get. Then we will dispatch the get assignment detail start and get assignment detail success and get assignment detail fail. And in this case the assignment is what we will get from the response data, and we want to change the get request to be assignments and then pass in the ID, and remember to put a slash at the end of that. Then the assignment we can pass into the get assignment detail success dispatch and change that as well to be an assignment that's passed in there. And we also need to update our action types. So you can just do something like this: get assignment detail start, fail, and success. Same kind of concept as before. And then we just need to change this here for these methods. So this will be get assignment detail start, get assignment detail success, and get assignment detail fail. And everything is pretty much good to go. So we can actually close that, or in fact we can actually copy those methods for the reducer, and we actually don't need these to be exported, same as the list ones. So we'll just grab these three here, and then we can come into the store reducers assignment, and we'll come down to the bottom, and right above the reducer we'll just paste these here. And instead we need to basically do exactly what these ones are doing, where they're passed in the state. So this will be like that, and for start we'll set it to this, and we can actually come up top here and set the current assignment to be an object which will store the current assignment's properties in there. And then for getting the detail success, then we will pass this all like that, and this will be assignment, and we'll set the current assignment to be the assignment that's being passed in. And then for the fail, this will update in the same way. And now we just need to add 3 more cases in here to handle those. So we've got get assignment detail start, which will get assignment detail start, get assignment detail success and failure, just like that. And let's just check, is the server happy? And it is. So now what we need to do is basically just call these methods here inside the assignment detail. So we're going to basically do the same thing here. We're going to need the connect method, and we're going to wrap it around the assignment detail. And I'll actually just go to the bottom and copy all of this here, and then just rename this to be assignment detail. And we'll import just the function we need from the store. So this comes from store actions assignments, and this is the get assignment detail, and that's what we'll pass in there as well. And we know that it takes in a token and an ID, so we pass the token and the ID in there. And instead of having assignments, we'll have the current assignment, which is from state.assignments, and just fix this dispatch there. And what we want to do now is the same thing as what we did with component did mount and component will receive props. So we'll copy that, paste that there, except this will be get assignment detail, and we'll put that one there as well. And we need to pass in the parameter coming from our URL. So that would be this.props.match.params.id, and we can actually just copy that whole line, and there we go. So if we come back, it seems like everything's good. We'll just come here, and instead of the title being card title, we'll output this dynamically and say that this is the title, which will come here and say constant title equals to this.props.current assignment. And if we come back, we're getting an unauthorized error, and that might be because of our settings. So if we go to home settings base.py and go all the way down here, and we can actually change this to be is authenticated, and I'll remove the session and basic authentication classes. And let's come back and refresh this, and let's close that and come back here to the detail view. And that's because we're not passing in new props.token. So let's get rid of that and try this again, and there we go. We see the test assignment title coming through there. And so now let's go back to &d, and we're going to take a look at the step component. Now the step you can find here under the navigation, and this is basically what it looks like. It's just like navigating through some kind of step-by-step task. And the way that we want to display this is kind of similar to this one. So we're just going to copy that code, and let's actually go into containers, and we'll create another one which will be called questions.js. And this is going to basically render out a step-by-step display of our questions. So let's just paste that all there, and we can come to the top, and we'll rename this app to be called questions, and go to the bottom and say export default questions. And we're going to need React, so we'll say import React from React, and I'm going to get rid of the constructor and just say this state is like that. And we can actually just take these questions and bring this into the assignment detail. So let's go over here and we'll say import questions from questions, and we'll take that and we will display that inside the inner content like that. And let's take a look, and this is what it looks like. Now it's not displaying this thing here because we didn't copy the CSS, which looks like that, but I don't think we actually want to either. But instead what I'll do is, if we come back here and go back into questions, we'll just go up to the top here, and this div will say that the style has a height of 100%. But what we'll do is we'll make sure that this content actually does have some padding on it, and it'll look better once there actually are questions inside there. And we don't want to display these large balls here like first, second, third, etc. We're just going to have little dots instead. So we can do that if we actually just close that there. Then you can see it looks like this. And the way that you do that is just by putting in progress dot like that and bring it into the steps. And if we save that, now it looks like that. And that looks a little bit better. And I think we can actually get rid of the inner card title as well. We can get rid of the whole inner card and just display these steps. So let's go back to assignment detail, and just going to cut out that card and place it like that. And we can actually import the skeleton as well from ant-d. So bring the skeleton in, and we have the loading as well. So we'll also bring in our higher order component like we did here in the assignment list, and we'll return the higher order component, and inside it we'll do the same kind of thing and say if this.props.loading, then we'll return the skeleton and say active, and otherwise we will return the card like that. Cool. And save, and actually I'm realizing that we will need the inner card so that we can display the question number. So we'll just create that card again and just bring the questions in there. We'll say type equals to inner, and what I'll do is say title equals to, and let's just take a look again. Cool. So we haven't given it a title. We could specify the title here, but what we want to do now is we want to basically grab the questions off of the assignment. So when we grabbed it here from the server, we want these questions to be passed into the assignment detail, and I think what we'll do is we'll pass them in as props into the question component here, and then inside these questions here we'll then loop through them and display however many questions there are. So basically the number of dots here will depend on the number of questions. That's basically what we're aiming for. So let's go back in here, and what we'll do is we'll say questions, and inside there we'll say that the questions equal to the current assignment, which we've got up here, and we can actually just say constant equals to this.props, and then say title equals to current assignment, and then like that we can pass that into here and say current assignment dot questions, and we actually can just put it like that. And what we can actually do is return a card by mapping through the questions. We can return a card for each question and pass basically a list of components into the questions, and that way when it comes through in the questions here, the component that will render will not just be this over here, this data in the steps. It'll actually be a component. And so let's just see how this will be done. We'll say .map, and we'll say for each question we're going to return a card, and we can actually just cut that out and say that there. When we do that, we're going to need to specify the key, which will be the question ID, and the title of the question is going to be the question.order, and we can actually then put the question next to it. So what we'll do is we'll output it in strings and just reference it with substitution. So question order dot, and then question dot question, and that looks a little bit better. And now inside the questions component we need to handle that. So let's first get rid of the steps. We don't need that. And the logic here of the current is correct. We'll keep that. We'll keep next and previous and render, but then here we'll say that the constant questions equal to this dot props, because we're going to receive it as props. So this will be questions, and these questions here will loop through inside the steps. So now instead of using the steps that was defined up top there, we're now going to use the questions and say .map for each question, and we can also use the index to use it as a key. So for each question we're going to create a step where the key is going to be equal to the index, so basically the index of the element in the list, and we don't need a title either. We're basically just creating a step. We can remove these class names because we don't actually have the CSS for that. And this div here is rendering out what used to be steps of the current step, but now we want to change steps to be questions, so that it will render out the question according to the index of that question within the list of questions we've passed down. So we can remove .content as well. And if we take a look at this, we've got steps is undefined in line 33. And we can change that to be questions.length and questions.length. And let's take a look now. And we're getting a cannot read property map of undefined. And the reason for this is because of our serializer. So let's jump back into the backend and go all the way to API and then to serializers. Now, the issue is that we have a nested component. Questions are referenced by a foreign key in the question model, and so that's why we're not seeing it come through. And so we're going to actually do the same kind of thing as what we did in the users. If we go back to the user serializer, we used a serializer method field where we defined the method to actually get this data. Well, we're going to do the same thing here for our questions. So let's just close that. And we'll say that the questions equals to serializers.serializer method field. And then here we just add a method and say define get questions and say it takes self and object. Now, in order to get the questions, we need to actually use another serializer, and that serializer will be the question model serializer. And so let's just go here and say class question serializer. And nothing funny is going to happen here. We'll just say serializers.model serializer. We'll set the class meta to have a model of question, which we'll import from models. And then we'll just say that fields equal to all, like the previous one. And this question serializer is going to be used to serialize the question objects. And so we can say that the questions equal to question serializer, where we're passing in the object. Remember, this object is an assignment. So we pass in the assignment, but we want to access the questions off of that assignment. And we can do that because if we took a look at the models again, the assignment doesn't have a questions field on it. But if you go back to the question model, we specified the question to have an assignment that was a foreign key of the assignment model. And basically what we need to do to make this work really simply is just by adding a related name. So we'll just add related name, and this is going to be questions. Now when we do that, this allows us to come into the serializer and say get object.questions.all. Even though we don't have the field on the assignment, the fact that we have the foreign key with a related name allows us to make that kind of query. And we actually need to make a migration for that. So we'll say make migrations, and then we can say migrate, and then we can run the server again, and we can close the models. And now using the question serializer, we're passing in the object's questions by using the related name. And we want to set many equal to true. And that's basically saying almost like there are going to be many questions that we need to pass because this is a nested serializer. And then we'll just say .data to get the data from the serializer. And then just say return the questions. And so now, if we take a look at this and refresh it, we're still getting undefined. So let's go into the assignments here, and we'll just say console.log the assignment to see what's going on. And to basically get around this with a dirty trick, what we can do is go into our assignment detail, and here right above the higher order component, we'll just say object.keys of the current assignment and say .length, and if it is greater than 0, then we will do all of this here. So let's just cut all of that and bring it there. Otherwise, just return null. And that means that we also need to wrap all of that inside a higher order component as well. So we'll just cut that out, bring that there. And now we're basically saying if the current assignment we have from the props has more than one key inside it, then return the stuff, otherwise return null. So now we can see at least that's being displayed, and it allows us to actually let the component will receive props take place. And then you can see here we're getting a response in the assignments which has an ID of 1, and we're getting a questions array, and you see each question has an ID, It has the question field, the order, the answer, etc. And we also get the teacher, but it's only returning 1, so that doesn't help too much. And for the choices, we also only get 1 and 2. So we basically, what we want to do is convert any time that we see something that shouldn't be returned as an integer or returned by its ID, we want to view it as a string. We want to see what does its defined string method return. Because in that case, what it's going to do is, for the choices, it's going to return the actual text, the title of each choice instead. And the user will be returned by their username and not by their ID. And we can nail that pretty quickly. If we just go back to our serializer, we can use a string serializer. So we can just say class string serializer and say this inherits from serializers.string related field. And this requires one method, which is the to internal value, and it takes in self and a value, and then we just say return value. Then what you can do is you can use the string serializer to convert fields in your other serializers into a string. So for example, on the question serializer, we have these choices. That's a field on the question model. So we can say choices equal to string serializer, where many equals true, because there are many choices for each question. And then we can return that here inside the fields. And if you wanted to return the teacher as well, let's say you wanted to return the teacher's name and put it in the top right hand corner, then you could do the same thing and say teacher equals to string serializer where many equals false. But we don't have that on the question, so we'll just leave it as it is, and we'll change the fields to be ID, choices, question, and order. And then we can come down to the assignment serializer here, and we'll say that the teacher is here because that's where it is. And again, we'll use the string serializer and pass in many equals to false. And cool, we'll just leave this as all because we pretty much are returning all the fields. So now if we come back here and refresh this, now you can see the ID, you can see the questions, and each question has 2 choices. You can see cool and not cool. You can see the question with its title. You can see the teacher by its username of admin, and that's really convenient. So now what we want to do is add the choices for each question inside the question. So what we'll do is we'll go back into our source folder, and here we're going to create a new folder inside there, which is going to be called the components folder, and this is going to hold the choices, and make sure this is choices.js, because we're basically just going to pass the state down into it. We're not going to make this a container. And so we'll start by importing React from React, and how we want to do this is to use the radio, and this is part of forms. So if you go up here, you can see this vertical drop down of radio options. We'll just copy that, and we'll change this to be class called choices, and then say export default choices, and we can get rid of the last radio item, and we'll remove the radio style to be outside of the class. And let's take this choices component and we'll remove the input there, and we're going to take this component into the assignment detail, and we'll say import choices from components choices, and what we want to do is render the choices inside the card, right? That makes sense. So we're passing the cards as components into the question, but each card that we pass in has answers inside it. So if we go all the way down here to the card, we basically want to pass these choices inside it. So like that, we'll say choices, and we'll just do it like that for now, and let's see what this looks like. And now you can see you get like option A, B, C for the questions. And what we can also do is come up top here and just define some styling, which we'll just say is the card style, and all we're doing is just making the margin top of 20 pixels and the margin of bottom of 20 pixels as well. You can come and bring that card style down, inside here. So we'll say style equals to card style. And let's check this out. And now it's a little bit more spaced out and looks a bit better. And you can select those different options as well. And let's go and actually create another question. And we'll add an answer and say, let's say it's true. And if we refresh this, we've got true there. We'll say true is the answer, and we'll add another choice, which is false. We'll say this is question 2. The assignment is test assignment. The order is 2. And if we come back here and refresh this, now you can see there's 2 dots. And if you go from next to the next one, you're going from question 2 to question 1 and back. And that's pretty cool. So now all we need to do is just pass in the options, or rather the choices of each question, as the actual choices to this radio group here. And so we already have the choices component that we're passing into the card. So inside there we can add some props and say this is equal to the question's choices, right? Because we're getting the choices off of each question. And that way, when we go back into choices here, we can just come down here, and instead of rendering out these components over and over, we will output them by mapping through the choices that came through as props. So we'll say this.props.choices.map, and we'll just say for each choice and pass an index, we will return a radio item like that. And we'll say that the value equals to C, where C is the choice that came through, and the text that goes inside there is the actual value of C as well. And we'll say that the key is equal to the index that was used to loop through in the map. So now if we come back, and so we're getting a warning here, which is saying that we're getting a unique key property error. And we actually want to remove this value statement there that's coming from the state. So what we'll do is remove the state there. And what I'm going to do is take the onChange and bring this back into the assignment detail. We'll put it over here. And instead of the value being now coming from the state, well, how we're going to manage this is pass the question ID into the choices. And so that way we can basically store inside the assignment detail the answer to each question inside a dictionary or an object, where each key is the question ID, and then the value of that question ID is the answer that the user's chosen. And that's very easy to update in the state. So basically what we're doing is at the top here, we're just going to say that the state equals to this object that has, let's call it user answers, which is an object. And then in the onChange, we're not only going to take in an event, but we're going to take in the question ID that was changed. And so we'll grab the user's answers via the state and say this equals to this.state. And then we'll say user's answers of that question ID. So we're setting the key in the dictionary equal to the event target value. And then we can just say this.setState of user's answers. And now we just need to pass the onChange inside our choices. So what we'll do is we'll say change equals to this.onChange, and then we can handle the change property here and say when onChange takes place, then we'll say this takes in an event and a question ID, and say it's an anonymous function that calls this.props.change, where we pass in the event, and then we need to pass in the question ID, which we'll grab by passing down as well. So we'll come into assignment detail, and we'll say that the question ID equals to q.id, and then that question ID here we can access here in the render. So we'll say constant question ID equals to this.props, and then pass in that inside our props.change. And what we can also do is pass in the user's answers. So right here above the return statement, we'll say that the constant user's answers equal to this.state, and we'll just wrap this to destructure it, and we'll pass that down into the choices as well, where it equals to user's answers. And in fact, the question ID should actually be referenced with the order, because otherwise we'll get the actual ID of the question, which could be like 12, 13, 14, etc., where you only have 2 questions and it's going to say question 1 is number 13. So that doesn't make sense. It's actually meant to be the order, like how we were displaying it in the title. And so with the user's answers being passed down into the choices, we can now say that the value that's currently selected in the radio group is equal to the value that's in the state. So basically what we'll do is say, if users answers, which we can actually grab up top here, we'll say constant users answers equals to this dot props, and say if the user's answers are not equal to null, and basically just check if the question ID that's coming from the user's answers is not undefined and it's also not null. So if that's true, then we will say that the answer is the value of the question ID inside the user's answers, and otherwise it is null. So basically that's what it looks like. And so if we take a look here, we'll need to log in, and if we go to test assignment, now you have the first question there, and you've got its answers showing. You've got cool and not cool, and if you go to next, you've got true and false. And now if we select cool and go click next and go back, you can see that that state was preserved, meaning the answer that we selected is still there. And if you go forward, you can click false or whatever, go back and forth, and there we go. So it's preserving the state in the questions, and basically what this means is that all we need to do is just add our questions in the backend. However many questions you add, it doesn't matter, because those questions will be looped through to give you the answers to those questions inside each card component, and each card component is being passed in inside each question. So in the last one, we added our assignment list and detail views to this project. And so if you'd like to follow along in this tutorial, you can just go to GitHub, to our repositories, and you can go to the Teach Me Django repository. And then you can just navigate to the commits to see which commit you'd like to navigate to. So currently we're on this third commit, which is the assignment list and detail views added. And so you can just clone this repository and navigate back to those commits. And so once you have everything cloned, what we're going to do in this tutorial is basically just add the form to create the assignments and also handle the graded assignments. So we're going to try and tackle both of those in this video. So once you've got everything up and running, then let's get started. So we have the front end and the back end servers running, and we can check this here in our boilerplate. And so this is what the assignment looks like. You can just select the answers, and when you click done, then it gives you this processing complete, which is basically just a message that displays when you click the done button. So you see you get message.success. And so what we'll want to do is handle the creating of a graded assignment when a user is finished answering all the questions. So basically we'll submit the user's answers to each question, and then on the server we'll evaluate whether the answer they selected was the correct answer, and then create a graded assignment object which will hold the grade of that user's assignment. So we'll get to that in a second, but what we actually want to do first is handle the form that will allow us to create assignments, and this will only be allowed for users that are teachers, so they have the isTeacher property being true. And so we're just going to come back in here, and we can actually close off a lot of this over here. And we're going to go inside the containers and create the assignment create.js. And we'll just copy that name there. And let's just import React from React. And what we want is actually a form that will allow us to add more fields to it. So here in &d, we can just go to the form, and if you scroll down, then we're looking for this one here, which shows that you can add a field and you can also remove those fields. So we'll just copy all of that code, and we'll come back in here, and it's actually quite a long one, and I'm actually going to remove the comments as well, and I'm going to remove these form item layout objects and the labels as well. We're not interested in that. And so let's just take a look at what this looks like. We also don't need the React DOM render, and we'll say export default, and let's call this the wrapped assignment create, and export that as the default, and then just make this the assignment create like that. And then we'll come into our roots and we're going to import it. So we'll say import assignment create from containers / assignment create, and we want to create a new path here, which will be when we go to /create, and this will be the assignment create component that will handle it. And let's see what errors we get. So we get that form item layout problem, and we can just sort that out. So we can just get rid of that there, and all of the form item layout with label. Cool, so let's check it out now. And let's go to /create, and we get this form, and we can add fields and remove them as well. And so let's add a link here in the breadcrumbs of our layout so that we can navigate there. So inside the layout component, we can go to the breadcrumbs, and we'll add another one here. And we already have the user ID in the state. And let's actually add the token. So this will be state.auth.token, and we're also going to add is teacher, which will come from state.auth.isTeacher. And then with the breadcrumbs, what we want to do is actually we don't want to display this link if we aren't authenticated. So we'll add a check here and say if this.props.token is not null, then we will show that link. Otherwise, just return null. And actually we can put that outside the breadcrumb. And then the same kind of concept for the next one. So we'll just copy this entire thing here, and we're saying if the token is not null and this.props.isTeacher is not false. Or in other words, we could say and this.props.isTeacher, so meaning it is true, then we will return a link that takes us to /create. And we can actually output that like this. And we'll say this is create, and there we go. Now let's come back, and if we refresh this and we see a little error here, let's get rid of that there. We have to say and this.props.isTeacher, and we get profile showing in brackets, so let's get rid of those brackets there. And there we go. Okay, so let's go into the admin here, and we're going to go change this mat user to be a teacher. So we'll just select that to be true, save and continue, come back here, refresh it, and we'll actually need to log out and log in, and there we go. And we're just getting those brackets again, so let's remove those, and there we go. And if I click on create, then it takes us to that form there. And so let's go back in here, and we can close the layout and the roots. And what we're going to do in the assignment create is we're going to manage the questions themselves. So here, how we're adding a field, this is like going to be adding a question, and we're going to manage those questions here on this component, and we're going to create another container which will be the question form. So basically we're creating like a form set, and what we'll do is we'll just render the question form over and over depending on how many questions we want to add, and we'll again manage the number of questions here inside the assignment create. And then the question form will actually be very similar to what we have here. We can actually pretty much copy everything in this file and paste it in the question form, and then we'll just rename everything here. So this will be wrapped question form. And in fact, actually we're not even going to create a form using &d, because what we're going to do is rather create form items and then pass those form items inside the general form that we have here, so inside this form. And so instead we can get rid of that call there, and we'll just call this the question form, and then this is the class question form. And so everything here is pretty much going to remain the same. we can actually make this a little bit shorter. And so each question form will manage the keys of that form, whereas the handle submit we're not going to handle on the question form. That will rather be on the assignment create view, so we can get rid of that. And now we have the render method, and so the label of this form item will not be the passengers, but instead this will be the choices. So inside the question form we'll manage the choices of each question, and in the assignment create form, if we just scroll up, passengers will rather be question. And so let's actually go into the assignment create and think about the form items that we want to have inside the main form. So we're going to have this button which will allow us to add a question. So let's rather make this add question, and this will be the submit button, but instead of making this a dashed, we'll make this type secondary, and we'll actually get rid of the width style. And if we take a look at this, now you've got add question and submit there. And what we also want is a field to pass in the title of the assignment. So we'll just create another form item here, and we'll set the label of this form item equal to something like title, like that. And then we're going to need to use the get field decorator like this one, so that we can actually give it a name which we'll access it by. So we just paste everything in there, and we'll keep all of those rules there except for white space. And the message here we can just say is please input a title, and then inside here these braces where we actually pass the component to input is going to be an input, which we already have over there, and we can take a look at this one as an example. So we'll just bring that inside there, and this input will have a placeholder of add a title, and we can get rid of the styling as well. And so now if we take a look, we see K is not defined, and that's the get field decorator name. So we're going to change that to be title. And if we come back here, now you've got the add a title field and add a question, and we'll also add an H1 above here, and then they will just say create an assignment. And then these form items, which we're basically mapping through the keys, what we're going to do here is rather just store a count of the number of question forms, and then create a question form to pass in based on the number of counts. So actually this constant form items will just change to questions, and initially this is actually going to be an empty list, and we can get rid of everything right here inside this method. So everything up till there. We can get rid of the keys, we can get rid of this get field decorator there, and we can get rid of that because we're not using it. And then let's just go up here. We have the handle submit, which will keep as this for now. We've got the add method, and instead of using this get field value of keys, which doesn't exist anymore, we can basically just get rid of all of that. We've got the state that we need to define up here, so we'll say state equals to this object here, which has a form count, and we'll say the form count initially is 1, and we can also remove the ID from up top there. And then everything here in the remove, we can also get rid of that, and we'll just make this an anonymous function as well. So inside the add method, what we want to do is grab the form count from the state and then set the state to just be that form count plus 1. So basically you're literally just adding 1 to the form count. So we'll say constant form count equals to this dot state, and then we'll say this dot set state and pass in the form count to be form count plus 1. And then the same kind of thing here in the remove method, where this will just now be -1. So this is a very basic way of doing it. Maybe you won't be removing the exact question that you wanted to remove, but for the time being it's good enough. And then we can just come down here, and what we want to do is loop through the form count in the state and create ourselves a question form based on the number in the form count. So we'll say for let I equals 0, and where I is smaller than this dot state dot form count, and then just say I plus equals 1. Then here we will push a component into the questions array and then render those questions here like this. And so what we want to push inside here is going to be the question form. So let's actually make sure we've imported that. So we'll say import question form from question form. And then over here we will just push that inside like that. And so let's take a look. We see we've got get field decorator of undefined inside question form, and that's because we took away the method here to create an ant form. So what we want to do is pass in the props of this component which is being created using the ant form inside our question form so that it inherits those props. So we'll just say pass in this dot props. Now if we come back, cool, now we can see it's kind of taking shape, except we've got a submit button there. So let's come down here and remove this form item. And that's starting to look a little bit better. But now we're getting this, each child in the array should have a unique key property. And so if we come back in here to the assignment create, we could say that the key equals to I. And if we come back, now we're just getting a nesting problem, which is basically that we can't return a form itself. So we're going to need to remove the form there. And these form items, we're basically going to need to wrap this inside a higher order component. So let's say import HOC from HOC. And then we'll take this and just wrap it around everything we have here. And so we've got add a field here. So let's make this add an answer choice. And what we also need to do is specify the actual answer itself. So we're going to need to create another form item above it so that the user can specify what the answer is. And again, you could get creative and maybe add like a checkbox next to each answer choice, which if you selected that one would make it the answer. But just to get this thing to work, let's just copy some of the stuff we have here. So we'll just make another form item. And then we'll need the get field decorator as well. So let's just copy that. And if we just save that, so you can see the get field decorator has the strange syntax of names of k. And basically what that's doing is allowing each form item to have a unique name that you can grab its value from. And so we'll need to play around with that to get this to work. So for the time being, let's just add a label here and make this answer. And we'll say, please input an answer to this question. And if we come back here, we've got k is undefined, and that's basically this problem here. So for the time being, let's just put in answers. And if we come back, we've got a cannot read property props of undefined. And that's because of the answers that we have here. Now, basically what we need to do is ensure that every question form has a unique get field decorator, not only within the form, but compared to other question forms. Because let's say we render out 5 question forms that all have a get field decorator of answers. Then it's basically going to set the value of each field in those 5 questions to be the same thing, because it's got the same get field decorator property. So basically what we need to do is pass in the question ID from the assignment create component here, and using that question ID we can then differentiate each question form from the next one. So basically here we'll use that same syntax that they did, where you basically pass in like a square bracket to access the index of to access an element by its index, and we'll just say this.props.id is what's being passed in. And so then we can come here in the assignment create and we'll set ID equal to I, because I is just one way of incrementing through it. And so if we refresh this, we're still getting that error. And so let's go back into the question form, and we can also remove white space from there. And we also need to pass in the actual form component in here, which is actually going to be an input. So we can just grab this one here and put that in there as well. And this is going to be the actual answer to the question. Well, in this case, the choices basically. So we'll have here the placeholder as what is the answer, and we'll remove the style, and let's come back and see, and there we go. Now it's working, and we've got add a title, we've got what is the answer, we can add an answer choice, and we're still getting those passengers coming through, and that's just coming from inside here. And so we're going to need to kind of do the same thing with the get field decorator of the choices. So this is going to be choices here, and we'll set the get field decorator to be choices of this.props.id, and we'll say please input a choice to the question, and then the placeholder here will be the answer choice, and then we can get rid of the style there. So let's just take a look at what we've got here. We've got one form item, which is the choices, and that's being looped through based on the keys count, which is what we had by default from AND-D, and we're using the ID of each question to differentiate the choices of each form, and we can get rid of that required false there. We don't need that. And each choice that's being looped through has its own input which says answer choice, and if the key length is greater than 1, then it's going to show the icon which will allow you to remove that answer choice. Then we're returning a bunch of form items. The first one is going to be the actual answer to the question. So it's going to say, what is the answer? So you input what the actual answer is. Then it's going to give you the choices to input, and then a button to add another answer. So if we take a look at that, you've got the title, the answer, add an answer choice, and add a question. Now what we need is a field that says what is the question. And so if we come back in here, where that can go is actually just right here above the answer form item. So we'll just copy that, paste it there, and this will be question. And then this here, the get field decorator, we're going to use as question to differentiate, and call this.props.id, and we'll say please input a question, and then here this will be add a question. And if we save that and check it out, now you've got one form showing which asks you for a question, the answer to the question, and then the choices as answers to that question. And if we add a question, you can see that the exact same form was repeated. You've got add a question, what is the answer, and the answer choice, and you can add an answer choice to each one. And so to kind of help differentiate the forms from each other, we'll just add a divide between them. So let's go back to the answer create, and we'll wrap this around with an HOC, which we'll actually need to import. So we'll say import HOC from HOC, and then here we will wrap this around like that, and then we'll pass in a divide, and a divider basically comes from AND-D, which is another one of their components, and then we can just simply just add it like this. And so now we need to pass the key inside the higher order component, and if we check this out, you can just refresh this. Now you've got that divide there, and if I add a question, then at least that divide is kind of separating them. You could make that thicker as well. And so we'll also add a little icon next to the question to remove that question. So just like how they do here, where they say if keys.length is greater than 1, then return an icon like this, and we'll grab that there, come here, and here where they're pushing each high order component, we're adding a question form and a divider. And so I'll just put it right there, and we'll say if questions dot length is greater than 1, then return an icon, and where disabled is where questions dot length equals 1, and on click we'll just say this dot remove, like that. So let's see what this looks like. And if we add a question, then we're seeing no icon yet. So let's go back here and say if it's greater than 0, and disabled is if it's equal to 0. And if I click add question, then there's the little icon to remove that question. And let's actually try and add it above the question form and see what this looks like. So if I add a question, then there's a little icon, and if you press it, then it removes the question. Cool. So let's actually add that question, and let's just pass in a title and just say test. we basically just want to see what the data looks like when we submit it. And we'll say this is question 1. We'll say this is answer 1. We'll add an answer choice and make that answer 2. And the question here will be question 2. The answer will just be answer 2. And just some choices. And we can make that one. And okay, so we're seeing that this is giving us the same answer inside the choices. So let's go back here to the question form. And so the problem is basically happening here inside this get field decorator. We're calling choices of this.props.id, but this should actually rather be choices of k like it was. And outside here, we're going to pass in questions of this.props.id. And so now if we check this out and we'll add an answer choice there, then you can see that those values are now different. They're unique. So let's fill in the rest of the form. If we click submit, we've got received values. We've got answers are A and B. The keys are 1 and 3 because we deleted one of those keys. We've got a question, which is question 1 and question 2, where those are the names of the questions we have here. And then we have the questions arrays, which are the arrays of choices to each question. So we've got empty and then A and basically Bieber, and then you've got the second one here, B and that. So that's how the data is coming through. And okay, yes, we also have the title there. So we want to basically take that data, format it a little bit, and send that through to the backend where the server will basically create the form. And so let's go and add the functionality inside the submit method here. So here you've got handle submit. And so basically the format of how we want to submit this is going to be an assignment object. So we'll say the assignment equals to an object, and it's going to have a teacher, right? Because we know when we create an assignment, it has to have a teacher and it has to have a title. So those are two easy properties. The title just simply comes from values.title, and then the teacher is going to be this.props.username, and we should have that at the bottom here. So we'll just go and copy that from the assignment detail. So let's just grab everything there and paste that. So we need the username, which is going to be state.auth.username, and we'll pass in the wrapped assignment create inside that connect method there. Just save that, and we're going to need to import connect from React Redux. And then we'll also add the actions in the store to handle creating the assignment. So we'll get to that in a second, but let's just get this object sorted in our handle submit. So we've got the teacher and we've got the title, but we also want to pass in the questions for that assignment. And I think the easiest is just to simply add in questions like that. And this questions key is going to be a list of question objects. And each question object has to have a title, it has to have the choices, and it has to have the answer. So basically, we're going to loop through the props in our form and push each question that we'll create as an object into a list of questions, which will then be passed here into the assignment object. So we'll start with the questions, which is going to be an empty list. And then we'll say for let I equal to 0, where I is smaller than the values.questions.length. So basically the length of questions. And then we'll say I plus equals 1. And every time we loop through, we're going to say push, and we're going to push an object inside there where each question has a title. It's going to have the choices, and it's going to have the answer. And so the title is simply just going to be the value inside the list of the questions. So this is just going to be values.questions of I. And actually, for the time being, let's just comment all of that out. And this is meant to be a colon there. So let's just go down and comment out the get assignment detail. And I'll just add some dummy data here. Here you've got the question, which is a list of question titles. And then you've got the questions, which is a list of the choices to that question. So basically what we need to do is make sure that we don't pass in the empty values in those arrays. You can see you have empty and then answer and incorrect. You want to get rid of those empty values. So what we're going to do is, let's just go back up here. We're going to set the choices to be values.questions. And actually this first one should be question of I, because question has an array of question titles that we're asking, whereas questions has a list of objects that have choices inside them. So we're going to say questions of I to grab each instance from that list, and then we say dot choices to access the choices of that object, and then we need to filter that where we don't want any null values. So basically we're just saying where element is not equal to null, and then the answer is just going to be values dot answers of I, and we just need to put a comma at the end of that. Cool, so now we've pushed the object into the questions array and we've passed those questions into the assignment, and now we just need to create the actions in the store to handle the logic of pushing that to the server. So let's go and do that now. We'll go into the store here, into assignments, and all the way at the bottom here we're going to need to actually just basically copy all of this again and change this to be the assignment create logic. So this will just call create assignment start, and then this one will be create assignment success and create assignment detail, or create assignment fail rather, and then this one will be just create assignment. When we create the assignment, we're going to take in a token to authorize the user, and then we're going to pass in the actual assignment when it's created. So here in the assignment create, this object will pass into this method, and we'll dispatch get, or rather create assignment start, and then here we don't need to console that out. We can just say dispatch create assignment success and create assignment fail. And we're going to need to change this to be a post request, where we'll post it just to this URL because it does handle post requests, and we're not going to get anything back from the response. We're just going to basically just dispatch the create assignment success if it did receive a response, and if there was an error then we just dispatch the fail. And now we need to go and add those action types in here. So something like this: create assignment start, fail, and success, and you can take those and bring them into these actions. So this will be create assignment start, create assignment success, and create assignment fail. And then the assignment here we need to post as the object that's being posted, and that's pretty much it. That's the whole method handled. So we can bring this here into the assignment create, and we'll say import create assignment from the store, and then that create assignment we will pass in over here, which takes in assignment, dispatch that method which takes in that assignment, and then we will call here this .props .create assignment of this .props .token and the assignment. So like that. And so let's see if we've got any errors. So we're getting assignment in line 113. So we come here, and that's because we don't need to pass that into the create assignment success. Cool, so let's add a title test question 1. The answer will be yes, and the choice will be yes or no, and we'll just say submit. And of course we get a 500 internal server error because we just aren't handling the creation of these assignments the way that we need to be doing that. So we can go and close the assignments there, and question form, and actually we didn't actually do the reducers yet, so let's go inside here. So we'll basically just copy all of this stuff here, the assignment detail start and all the way up to the success, and we'll just copy and paste that there. And this will be the create assignment start, this will be create assignment success, and then create assignment fail. And then here we'll add in 3 more cases, where this one will be create assignment start, and we'll say create assignment start, and this will be create assignment success, which will be create assignment success, and the fail one. And let's just go handle what happens there. It's pretty much going to be the same thing, except we don't get any assignment action there. And pretty much that's it there. So we can close the reducer and we'll go into our backend now. So let's go to API. And we're going to need to go to our views. Here we have the assignment view set. And so basically you can actually override the methods on a view set. And you can check that in the documentation of the Django Rest Framework. So for example, if you wanted to override the create method, you could just say define create, which takes in self and a request. And the basic logic that proceeds when the create method is executed is that it uses the serializer, so the assignment serializer in this case, which is in serializers.py. So it would take this serializer and we would pass in the request data into the serializer. Then we would say if the serializer is valid, then using the serializer create an assignment, because that's what the serializer basically does, converts the JSON into an object, and then return a response, which is either an HTTP 201, that means it's created, or return an HTTP 400, which means it's a bad request. So basically we'll say that the serializer equals to the assignment serializer, this one here, and we say that the data equals to the request.data, which is coming here inside the create method. And then we just say if the serializer.is valid, then proceed. Otherwise you can just call it like this. You have to do that, otherwise it won't let you move on. And then we'll just say that the assignment object equals to serializer.create the request. Remember, this will only happen if it's valid, and we can actually just do that if serializer is valid. And we'll say if there is an assignment, then we will return a response, and the response we can import from the REST framework. So we just say from REST framework dot response import response, and then we'll import some statuses as well. We'll say from REST framework dot status import, and we're going to need the 201, which is created, and we're going to need the 400 bad request, and then we'll just grab that there and say return a response where the status equals to HTTP 201 created, otherwise return a response where the status equals to the HTTP 400 bad request. And we can put that like that. Cool. So this assignment serializer.create, this is a method on the serializer. So if you come here to the serializer, we can actually define that create method, and that's going to be quite handy because the data that we're getting in the serializer is really just not going to match what the serializer is expecting. So we're going to override the create method on the serializer to pass all that data into exactly how we need it to be passed, and then create the objects that need to be created. So for example, the choices, and then assign the choices to the questions, assign the questions to the assignment, and return the assignment. Basically that's what we're doing. And so it is quite a long method. So we'll say define create, and it's going to take in self and request. And remember, this request is what's being passed in here, this request there. So we get access to the request.data. So we'll say request.data equals to that data, and we can actually print it out as well. So let's test it out. We'll add a title. We'll say question 1, answer is yes, choice yes and no. Click submit, and let's see inside the terminal. And here you get the teacher is Matt, title is title, questions is a list of objects where we've got title is question 1, choices is yes or no, and the answer is yes. Cool. So with this data, we basically just need to think about what we need to create in terms of models. So far we've got the assignment, the question, and we need the choice as well. And so we'll start by creating the assignment. So we'll say the assignment equals to an assignment object like that. And we're going to need to assign the teacher and the title to the assignment. So we'll say the teacher equals to user.objects.get, where the username equals to data of teacher. Remember, teacher is Matt in this case. So we're getting the user object that corresponds to that username. and we're going to need user imported. So we'll say from user.models import user. And if we come back down here, then we can say that the assignment teacher equals to teacher. We'll say the assignment title equals to data of title, and then we say assignment.save. Cool. So that is the assignment being created. Now we need to create the questions, and the way that we're going to do that is just by looping through this list of questions and accessing these properties inside that dictionary. So we'll say for question q in data of questions, and that's going to return a list. Then we'll say that the new question equals to a question object, because remember we have to create a new object every time we loop through this. And we'll say that the new question title, or rather the question actually, because that's what it is on the model, equals to q of title. So that's the actual question that's being asked. And then we'll say that the order equals to some kind of integer, which we'll loop through over here. We'll say order equals 1 for the first one, and we'll say that equals to order. And then we can say new question.save, and we'll increment the order at the end of the for loop. So there's the new question. Now we need to assign the choices to that question. So we'll say for choice in question of choices, we'll say the new choice equals to a choice object, and that new choice title will be equal to C, which is what we're looping through. And then we can just save the choice and then add the choice to the new question's choices. So we'll say dot choices dot add the new choice, like that. And then we just need to add the answer to the question as well. So we'll say new question dot answer equals to the choice object that we created. We don't want to create another choice object. We can basically just fetch the one that was already created. So we'll say choice dot objects dot get, where the title equals to q of answer. And then we can assign the assignment of this question equal to the assignment that was created at the beginning of this create method, so this assignment here. And then we can save our question and then tally our order by saying order plus equals to 1, and at the end of all that we can say return the assignment. So there we go, that's our create method. And if we come back and click submit, it seems we've got an error connection refused. So let's see why that is. We see we've got from user.models, so this is meant to be from users. And let's try that again. Click submit, and this time we get a 401 unauthorized, and that's because we're not logged in. So we'll just log in, and we actually might just need to refresh the page here. So we'll log in again, and let's click on create. We'll add a question there. Let's check that it wasn't created here, and okay, so it wasn't, so that's good. So this will be the first real assignment, and we'll say this is this cool? Say the answer is yes. Choices are yes and no. And we'll add another question here and say, does this work? The answer is yes. Choices are yes and no. Submit. And we get a 500 error again. Let's see. And it's telling us that there's a not null constraint, which is the answer ID. So let's go back here, back down. This is most likely happening because by default the serializer is expecting us to pass in an ID. So let's just try and go to the models here, and what I'm going to do here is say blank and null equal true, and let's just stop the server here, and we'll just say make migrations, and then say migrate, and let's just run the server here. And if we come back and submit this, we're getting the same issue on the API question assignment ID. So again, let's just add the blank and null equal true to that. And this is obviously a temporary fix. This is not something that actually makes sense. So let's try it again now. We'll submit it, another 500. And now we're just getting get return more than one choice. So that means that it was actually created. So let's go back into here and let's refresh this. Okay, so we've got the first real assignment is created 3 times, so let's just delete those there. And let's see what we need to get rid of. Let's just get rid of all those yes or no's and do that. And then we can go to the questions. We've got does this work, and question 2. Okay, so now let's click submit. And okay, we're returning 2 again, so let's delete everything. Okay, cool. Now let's try it again. We'll click submit. And okay, I understand why this is happening now. It's because we're passing in the choices as yes and no for both of these questions. So what's happening in the serializer is that it's creating those without even checking if they are actually existing. So another way to do this would just be to use the get or create method. But what I'm going to do is just, for the time being, we will just delete those and change the answers that we're submitting. So we can come back here into this and we'll say, does this work? Answer, let's just make it true. And we'll say choices are true and false. And if we click submit, now we didn't get any errors there. And there we go. Post request returned 201. And if we go back to the home view, there's the first real assignment. And okay, so we've got this navigation error. Let's go fix that. And we can navigate into source. And then the assignment list, we can just close that there, and this is not meant to go there. This should rather go to the ID there. So we'll just change this to be item.id, and that should work. So let's go back home here, and if I click on that one, it takes me to number 7. Cool, there we go. So we've implemented the create form pretty much correctly. There's 1 or 2 problems that exist, and I'm sure those can be fixed, but I'm not really too worried about exactly how functional that is. We can always tweak that later. And the bottom line is that we were able to get this form to work. So now you can create these assignments here on the front end and see them in this list display, meaning that they are created in the back end. So now we're able to create assignments, and what we want to do to finish off is to add some functionality to create a graded assignment. So if we take a look at the API models, we originally created these 4 models, and one of them is the graded assignment, which basically is just created once somebody actually takes this assignment and actually just fills in the answers and clicks to submit their assignment. So what we want to do is just add the functionality to handle that in the back end, and also display the person's created assignments on their profile. And so if you'd like to follow along, you can go to GitHub to our Teach Me Django repository and head over to the commits. The last one was this assignment creation working commit, where we finished creating the assignment logic on creating those assignments in the backend. And so this is where we'll be continuing in this one. So once you've got everything ready in your editor, then let's get started. So what we're going to do to get started is create a graded assignment list view, which will inherit from the list API view from the Django Rest Framework. And so what we'll just do is come to the bottom here after the view set, and we'll just create a class and call this the graded assignment list view. And we're going to import from Django's generics to handle that. So we'll say from the REST framework.generics import the list API view. So we'll inherit from that list API view here, and that means all we need to do is just specify the serializer class, which will be the graded assignment serializer. So we don't have that yet, so we'll just go and create it now. And so we'll just call this the graded assignment serializer. Let's just copy that right there, and we actually need to import this model then. So this will be the graded assignment serializer, which will just inherit from the model serializers. And again, we'll specify the class meta, where we'll specify the model as the graded assignment, and we'll say that the fields are all the fields. And so if we think about what all those fields are, it would be the student, the assignment, and the grade. Now, just like how we have in the assignment, we have the teacher, which is using the string serializer to display the user via its username. So I'm going to do the same thing for the student, because otherwise we're going to get the student ID, and that's not useful. So we'll just say student equals to string serializer many equals false. And so now we just take that graded assignment serializer and we just import it here. So from .serializers, and we specify that as the serializer class. And we can also set the query set to be the graded assignment objects.all. And so this assignment list view, actually we'll need to import the model there as well. We'll take that list view and we're going to go into the graded assignment URLs. And currently we have the default router, but we're not going to use the router. Instead, we'll use just our custom views. So we'll just create a list there, and we can get rid of that and say from API.views import graded assignment list view. And we'll say from Django.urls import path. And then here we'll create a path which goes to just this empty string, and then use the graded assignment list view dot as view, and we can get rid of that there as well. Cool, so everything seems to be working, and we can head over to the local host, and if we go to graded assignments, then we're going to be asked for authentication credentials. So let's create the logic here on the profile to display a list of graded assignments. So we'll come back here and go to source, and then into containers and to the profile. And so we need to actually make sure that we're being sent to the correct URL, because it's meant to be profile/2, and now we see that username there. So let's just go to the layout, and this is meant to go to profile, that link there, and there we go. And so we basically just want to return a list of items. So we'll just go here to list from int_d, and we'll just take the same thing we used earlier. So we'll copy all that and just come down and paste that there. And all we need is this large size there, and we can go and delete all of that there. And then what we'll do is inside this div, we'll then just paste all of that there, and we'll make sure that we wrap that inside an h1, and actually just get rid of that h3 there as well. And the data source, I'll just make an empty list for now. We can remove the header and the footer, and we need to make sure that we import this list here at the top, so we'll just paste that there, and there we go. Now let's check it over here. Cool, so that now we're just getting no data coming through. And we want to use a component here which is basically like a progress component. So if we just go down, you'll see this here under feedback, and we get different kinds of progress components. I'm just going to use the mini circular progress bar, and it's very simple to use. We'll just copy that, and we'll just go into the components and return a result.js component here. We'll say import React from React, and we'll say that our constant result takes in props and then just returns a progress item. So let's import that at the top like this, and all we want is one progress item, and we can actually just use parentheses like this. So it's going to return a progress item like that, and the percent is going to be equal to props.grade, which will pass into the component, and the width we can keep there just like that, and I'll just say export default result, and then that result we can take into the profile here, and we'll say import result from .components result, and we will render each item to be a result instead of being a list item. So this will be result, and this will just say is a assignment. So for each assignment we'll return a result where the key equals to the assignment ID, well, graded assignment ID, and the grade is equal to the assignment dot grade, like that. And now we just need to pass in the data source as the information that we get, as the data we get from the backend. So we're going to go and create a new reducer to handle all of that. So inside the store, we've got the assignments, and we'll just create another one here, which will be the graded assignments.js. And it's going to be similar to the assignments that we have here already. So I'm just going to get everything from the get assignment list and paste that all in there. So we've got get assignment list start, and we're going to need to add new action types in here as well. And this could be just something like this: get graded assignment list start, fail, and success. And then we can use this here in our graded assignments actions. So we'll call this one the get graded assignment list start, and then get graded assignment list success, and get graded assignment list fail. And then this will be get graded assignments. And we're going to need to take in the username as well. We could also filter the users by the token, but we'll just pass in the username to make it easier. And instead of getting assignments, this is going to go to graded assignments instead. And we will do the same kind of thing here. We'll dispatch the get graded assignment list start, and get graded assignment list success, and get graded assignment list fail, and just pass in the error there. Cool, so that's the methods that look to be taken care of. And we just need to do the same thing in our reducers now. So we'll create graded assignments.js, and this will be the same sort of thing as what we have here in the assignments. So everything from there, we'll just paste that there, and then we need the reducer here, so we'll copy that, paste that there. We don't need a lot of these here, so let's get rid of all of that there. So we only have these three, and we don't need the current assignment either. Those will be assignments. This will be get graded assignment list, and there, and there, and this will be get graded assignment list start, which will dispatch this one, and then we'll just put the rest of them in here. And there we go. That's pretty much our reducers taken care of there, and our actions. So we can close that one there. And I'm just going to keep this one open for now. So we'll head over to the profile. And here we're going to use the same kind of logic as we did in the assignment detail. We'll just copy the component did mount, and we'll receive props. And then we'll add those methods in there. And we are getting the token already. So if the token is undefined, or it's not undefined rather, then we're going to dispatch a method, and we're going to import that from our graded assignments. So this comes from store actions graded assignments, and this is the get graded assignments. So we'll say this.props.get graded assignments, which will take in this.props.username and the token. And then the same thing here, dispatch get graded assignments with new props.username and new props.token. And we've got both of those in the state there. And then we just need to pass in the get graded assignments method here, which will take in the username and token, and we will dispatch get graded assignments of the username and the token, just like that. Then we pass our map dispatch to props inside the connect method, and let's see what this looks like. So let's just refresh that there. And cool, so now we just need to pass the graded assignments into our state with state.graded_assignments, and we need to get that reducer in there as well. So let's go to the index.js file, and we'll just copy this one and make this the graded assignment reducer, and make sure that this comes from graded assignments, and then this will be graded assignments, which is the graded assignment reducer. Cool. So we've got that set up, and now we can access that via the state. And now we just need to pass this as the data source in the list. So like that. And this is actually meant to be this.props.graded assignment. And cool. So now let's go into the admin and we'll create a graded assignment. So we just add one there. We'll say the student is Matt, assignment is the first real one, and we'll say 50 is the grade. Now if we come back here and refresh that, and we just needed to add the correct action names here, or action types rather. And now if we check if it works, cool, there we go. And we can actually get rid of the bordered in this table. And if we come back here, there we go. And lastly, we can also add the loading here, which will come from state.gradedAssignments.loading. And we'll just come in here and say if this.props.loading, then we'll return a skeleton. So let's grab the skeleton from there, and we'll just say return the skeleton with active. Otherwise, all of this stuff will be rendered out, and we'll need to get a higher order component in there. So we'll say import the HOC, which comes from HOC, and this is just HOC like that, and we'll just wrap it like that instead of the div, and we'll also return it around this as well. Cool. Now we come back, and there we go. Now the only issue is that instead of returning the graded assignments for the user Matt, we're returning all of the graded assignments, and that's not what we want to do. What we want to do is actually filter this inside our view. So let's go back to the API and then views. And here in the graded assignment list view, we're saying that the query set is equal to graded assignment objects.all. So that means that for every single person who uses the list view, they're going to get all the graded assignments back. And that's obviously not what you want. You want the assignments that you have completed. So what you can say is define get query set. And this just takes in self. And then we'll start off by saying that the query set is equal to all the objects, but then we will get the username from the URL. So basically what we'll do is we'll query, instead of graded assignment, let's just find this here in our actions, instead of querying it like this, we're going to pass in an extra parameter here, which will be username equals to, and then we'll just output this dynamically, and that will be the username that's being entered in the function here. So this kind of query is what we'll look for in our view. So over here, we'll say that the username equals to self.request.queryParameters.get the username or none. And we'll say if the username is not none, then we'll say the query set equals to the query set we currently have, and then filter that where the student _username, so basically the user's username, is equal to the username. And then we'll just say return the query set, whichever that may be. So now if we come back, we're obviously going to get the one that we created, but let's go back to it and change this to be the test user. And if we refresh this now we don't get that data coming through. And okay, we're not logged in either, so let's log in as well. So let's go to profile, and now we see hi Matt and no data coming through because this one is not for the user Matt. So now we know that that's working, and we're retrieving the graded assignments that are for that specific user. So now all we need to do is just, whenever we complete an assignment like this one, then once we click that submit button here, or this done, we'll actually change that button name. So we'll just go to the source, containers, and then assignment detail, and let's just go down here, and this is going to be inside the questions. So let's go to containers questions, and then this will just be submit, like that. And if you click next, now the button says submit, and when you click submit, it will process this in the backend. So let's also, instead of saying message success like that, what we can do is just handle this here. We'll say handle submit, and what we'll do is just grab that there and call this dot handle submit, and come back in here, say paste that there, and then we'll do the rest of the logic there. And actually, instead of handling the submit here, we already have most of the logic on the assignment details, so I'm going to cut that out and paste that there. And then here, when we click the submit button, we'll call this .props.submit, and then here, when we reference the questions here, we'll say submit equals to this .handle submit, and we can actually just make sure that we call this function like that, and we'll do the same thing here. So when we handle submit, we're going to say message.success, so that comes from and d, so we'll import it like this. So now we have it here. So we'll say submitting your assignment, and so now we just need to handle the logic in the store where we will create a graded assignment. So we'll just go to the store assignments, and I'm just going to copy the create assignment method here. I'm not going to handle all of the reducer stuff, so we'll just go into graded assignments like this and just create our function like that, and this will be create graded assignment, which will take in a token and assignment, and it will post to graded assignments like that, and we won't dispatch any methods like this either. So basically we're just posting to the server, and we'll just say console.log success if it went through correctly. And so our assignment needs to actually have a few things. It needs to have the assignment ID that it corresponds to. It needs to have the answers that the user provided so that we can verify that on the server, and it needs to have the username of the person that created the assignment. And we're going to bring this into the assignment detail, so we'll just import it here. And then we'll take this graded assignment here, and we'll say this.props.create graded assignment, and come all the way to the bottom and add our method here, which will say takes a token and assignment, and say dispatch create graded assignment of the token and the assignment. And so now when we call this method over here, we're going to need to pass in this.props.token and then a assignment as well. So the assignment, we can just say constant assignment equals to an object, and we'll say that the username is this.props.username, and then we need the assignment ID, and we'll also need the answers, so where answers are the user's answers to the assignment. And the way that we can pass in the assignment ID is just by accessing this.props.currentassignment.id, where the current assignment is here in the state already. And then the answers will need to somehow store, which we already are. We're storing that in the state. We have the user answers like that. So we'll just pass that in as the user answers like this, and then just say create the graded assignment with the token and the assignment like that. And so let's see if we've got any errors. We've got user answers. So this is meant to be a clone of that. So we'll just say constant user answers equals to this dot state. And there we go. So let's just select this. Is this cool? And does this work? True. Click submit. And we get method not allowed on graded assignments. And that's correct because we haven't set up a path to handle that yet. So let's bring this to the front there. And currently we only have the assignment list view. So let's import the create API view as well. And then we'll say class graded assignment create view, which inherits from the create API view. We'll say the serializer class equals to the graded assignment serializer, and we'll set the query set equal to the graded assignment objects.all. And so we're going to need to override the method of creating the graded assignment because we're passing in data that it's not really understanding or knowing how to handle. So if we take a look at the serializer, then here we have the graded assignment serializer, and we can close questions and graded assignments for a bit. So just like how we overrode the create method on the assignment serializer, we're basically going to do the same thing here for the graded assignment. So we'll just copy that there and paste this there, and we'll go to the view here, and we're going to override the method of creating on this create API view. And the way that you do that is just by overriding the post method. So we say define post, which takes in self, and basically we're doing the same thing as what we did here in the assignment view set. So let's just take all of that there and paste that there. So again, we're taking a serializer, and in this case it's the graded assignment serializer, pass in the request data. If the serializer is valid, then we'll say that the graded assignment equals to serializer.create the request, where we'll handle the create method here. And if there is a graded assignment, then return an HTTP 201 and otherwise that. And now we just need to work on the logic here. And so for the time being, let's just go and print out the data so that we can see it come through. So we'll say submit, and if we come back here to the terminal, then we're getting that method not allowed, right? So let's open up the store again just to fix that URL, and we'll say that this goes to /create, and then in our URLs we'll create a path here which goes to /create, which will be the graded assignment create view, which will handle this view like that. Cool, so we can close that, and now if we come back here and do it again, now it's just a bad request. So if we check that, and so let's just go back to the view here, and we see we are using the graded assignment serializer. We're passing in the request data, and let's just create a print here. We'll just say print the request data like that. Now if we come back, click submit. So we see assignment ID is 7, and then we get the answers as 1 being yes, 2 being false. However, we're not getting the username, which is this.props.username. So if we come down here, let's just add that one in there. Username is state.auth.username. Now if we come back here, we'll submit it again. And if we come back here, now we've got the username coming through there. And so let's try and handle this in the create method now. So basically what we want to do is grab the assignment that has an ID of 7. So let's make sure we have everything imported here. We do. So we'll say that the assignment equals to assignment objects dot get with ID equals to the data of assignment ID. And then we also want to get the student corresponding to the username. So we'll say student equals to user.objects.get, where the username equals to data of username. And now we want to create a graded assignment. So we'll say graded assignment equals to a graded assignment, like that. And we'll assign the assignment as the assignment we just grabbed, like that. And let's just bring this down a bit. We also want to assign the student equal to the student that we grabbed here as well. And now basically we want to compare each question's answers to the answer that the user selected, and basically just store like a count of how many they've gotten right, and then compute how many they got right as a percentage of how many questions there were, and assign that as the grade. So what I'm going to do is say that the questions equals to a list of questions for all the questions in the assignment. So this assignment that we grabbed here, we're going to say this is equal to Q for Q in assignment.questions.all. So that will basically take all of those question objects and store them in this list. And then the next thing we're going to do is grab the answers from the request data's answers. So if we look at this object again, answers is an object with the keys being 1 and 2 and etc. So one way that we could do this is by saying that the answers equals to a list of data answers of, let's say, A for A in data of answers. Basically what we're doing is we're saying for every key inside data of answers, get the value. That's why we pass in A inside the list to index the key from data of answers. Remember, data of answers is a dictionary, so we get all the keys from the dictionary and then get the value of the key from inside the dictionary, and we're basically creating a list of values from the dictionary. And then what we just do now is just compare the answer for each question compared to the answer inside the answers list. So we could just say for I in range of length of questions, so we'll perform the loop however many questions there are, and say if questions of I, to access that first element of the questions list, .answer.title is equal to answers of I. So what that means is that if the answer of the question we just checked in the list is equal to the user's answer, then we'll add 1 to the user's count. So we'll just say that the answered correct count equals 0. And then here we'll say answered correct count plus equals 1. And then here we'll just increment the counter I to loop through the next item in the list. So it'll go through all the items in the list, and then you have an answered correct count, which will be how many they got right. And the length of questions is how many questions there are. So we just say that the grade equals to the answered correct count divided by length of questions. And then we'll just say that the graded assignment.grade equals to the grade that we just calculated. And then we'll just say graded assignment.save and return that graded assignment. And there we go. That's our method of creating the graded assignment. So if we check, everything is still working. So let's come back here and click submit. And we're still getting a bad request on this URL. And that's most likely because we don't have a student that corresponds to the user that just submitted this. So let's go back to home, and we actually haven't registered that model in the database. So let's go to users and then admin, and we'll import the student. And then at the bottom here, we'll just copy this one here and say this is the student. And if we come back here and refresh this, now you've got the students there. And of course we don't have the student for Matt. So let's just create a student there and save this as Matt. And now if we submit it, we're getting another one here. So let's go back to the assignment and see why this is. And so what I'm going to do is actually just get rid of the if statement here, because most likely the serializer is not valid. So we only just need to call that. So let's just do it like that. And if we come back in here and submit this, now we get success. So if we take a look in the admin and go to graded assignments, now we can see 2 have come through there. And this first one is worth 50%. And let's just see why that is. If we go back here, we said, is this cool? Yes. Does this work? False. Let's say this is true and submit it now. And if we go back here and check the latest one, now we get 1. And what we can actually do here in the serializer is if we come down, we can say that the grade equals to this times 100. So that now if we submit that, come back to graded assignments, now it's 100, and we can go to our profile, and yeah, so that's why we were getting 0.5%, 0.5 and 1%, whereas it should be 100%. Cool. So now those methods are finally working, and we've basically completed everything that we set out from the moment we demoed the application, which was the ability to create custom users, to actually get that data in the front end, store everything with authentication, to create assignments. And I know we're not adding too many validation checks to see if the user actually is a teacher or not, but those are small things that you can add in to complete everything. And then lastly, we added the functionality to create a graded assignment, which is very cool. So all you do is just fill in the answers to the assignment, and there you go. It creates the graded assignment for you. Yes, you can fill in that form as many times as you want. It's not actually checking whether you've done it before. So again, there aren't many validation checks in place, but it's besides the point. It's more to show you how you can create the different users and get that data across into the front end, because that's really the biggest effort is. It's in learning how to customize those serializers, learning the methods that you can override. And it gets really tricky when you have nested relationships and foreign keys. So learning about serializers can actually be quite beneficial, as we've seen. So that ends off this tutorial series for the time being. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a comment down below and let us know what you thought about the series, and if there are any other things that you think we should be adding into it or concerns that you have. And other than that, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.